Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Camille looked at the homeless man from inside the car. Had she spent 16 years thinking of him as her closest, dearest person? How could this have happened to her? This would never have happened if her mom, her real mom, had been alive. Evelyn looked at herself in the mirror. She thought she looked disgusting. Her tummy was already treacherously visible. Her face became a text. Pregnancy clearly did not color her. And they say pregnant women have some kind of special beauty. That's not her. Father entered the room with the entourage. How are you doing? I don't know. I think I'm very fat, and the dress fits like a cow. Nonsense. Daughter, you're the most beautiful. Look what I brought you. Her father held out a black box covered in velvet. Evelyn leisurely opened it. Inside lay a necklace. Dad, how beautiful is it? Are those real diamonds? She couldn't take her eyes off the jewelry. Of course, my real daughter deserves it. Let me help you put it on. The stones shone around the girl's neck. Her father put his arm around her and asked her quietly, "Are you sure you're doing the right thing?" It was not the first time he had asked her that question. "You know I don't like your choices. That Stephen of yours is a tomboy and a slacker. And you've got a kid to raise. You've got to live with him. My mother and I will help you, of course, but my daughter's husband must be wealthy and provide for his family. I'm not sure about Stephen. Dad, he's a good kid. We just need time. Stephen will do fine. He's smart. Well, you just know that Mom and I are always here for you, and we'll help you with anything. You just have to ask." He put his arms around his daughter and pulled her close. At that moment, Evelyn felt like a bird in a cozy nest. Her father had always had a heart for her. She had grown up in absolute love and care. Dad's chain of stores brought in an excellent income. The family didn't need anything. Evelyn studied at the best grammar school, where together with her the basics of science learned the daughters of factory directors, businessmen, politicians. She met Stephen at a club. She and the girls had gone there after graduation. They wanted to dance. The champagne made her dizzy. A cute guy asked her to dance. "You miss me?" he asked Evelyn. "No, on the contrary, it's very nice here," she replied, laughing. "And I know places where it's much better." "And where is this place? Do you want me to show you?" There was a twinkle in the boy's eye. "I'd like that." They left the club in anticipation of the adventure. Evelyn was ready for anything crazy. The guy led her to the bike. "Let's go, shall we? Get on, and hold on tight." She sat behind him and hugged his chest. They raced through the nighttime city, past houses, parks, down an empty highway. The wind fanned their dress. Evelyn played with her hair. She wasn't scared and wanted to laugh at the top of her voice. Stephen took her hand and they ran up the stairs of some house. They ran until they were on the roof. The view of the city was incredible. Evelyn had never been on a rooftop in her life. She gazed, mesmerized, at the lights that illuminated the streets. "It's so beautiful here," she said quietly. The guy pulled a bottle of champagne out of his backpack, and when he had time to bring wine with him, flashed through her mind. "Here you go." He held out a plastic cup of champagne to her. "Let's get acquainted. I'm Stephen, and I'm Evelyn." The girl laughed for some reason. Everything that was happening to her now seemed to be a very exciting madness. A strange guy on the roof of a high-rise, champagne. It's not the first time I've been here," Stephen said. "I come when I want to be alone. And today I suddenly wanted to show you this place. I noticed you and your friends at the bar. You don't look like them at all, standing out in some special way." Evelyn didn't know what to say. Champagne surrounded her head treacherously. Her thoughts were jumbled and confused. Suddenly, Stephen jumped up and stood on the edge of the roof. "Would you like me to walk along the edge for you now?" No. Tear, and quickly you'll fall off." The girl was scared out of her wits. She ran up to him and took his hand. The guy jumped down, looked at Evelyn with an attentive gaze. They kissed. Evelyn had never been so happy before. Does it really happen like this? She thought, seriously considering that there was no one else on earth right now but the two of them. By the time the bike slowed down in front of Evelyn's house, the sky was already screaming. Shy rays of sunshine. The girl didn't want to blurt out her arms, but hugged Stephen tightly. Everything that had happened to her this day overrode all other events. And after all, today was the graduation in her gymnasium. She had finished her studies, and adult life was ahead of her. Her parents wanted to send her to the capital to study. But now Evelyn realized that she didn't want to go anywhere. She wanted to see this guy every day, to be near him, to feel his lips on her face, as it was this night. As goodbye, he kissed her again. Evelyn walked into the house where everyone was still asleep, but she didn't feel like lying down. The girl walked to the kitchen to make coffee. No, she was definitely the crazy one. A complete stranger seemed almost like her own. The kind of guy every girl dreams of. She had given herself to him on the roof, under the glitter of the night stars, and now she could feel his touch all over her. Suddenly, Evelyn realized that they hadn't even made an appointment to meet. Would she never see him again? The girl didn't notice her father entering the kitchen. "What's on your mind, beautiful girl?" said Christopher, a peck on the daughter's cheek. "Good morning, Daddy. Would you like some coffee?" "I'd love some. How was the party?" "We had a great time at the club dancing." "Dad, I met a guy. His name is Stephen." "What kind of guy is that?" "He's very nice." The girl spun around the table in the kitchen. "He's the greatest guy in the world, the best guy in the whole wide world. I'm pretty sure. I love him." "Well, it's a little early for that kind of statement, don't you think?" Dad was drinking coffee and put the cup on the table. "You just met him and you're already in love with him." "Your mom and I, Evelyn," interrupted her father. I know. You've known each other since you were kids, played in the same sandbox and went to the same school. I've heard it 100 times in history, but love at first sight does happen. Now I know for a fact that it can happen." "Okay, maybe it does." Christopher hugged his daughter. "I gotta go to work." "What are you planning on doing today?" Nothing. I'm gonna sleep in, enjoy the rest of the day." "Enjoy it. Just don't forget the entrance exams are coming up." Rest is rest, but university entrance exams aren't off the table. Evelyn went up to her room and collapsed on her bed. She wanted to sleep. As she fell asleep, she thought about the guy who had burst into her life so unexpectedly. It was quiet in the dormitory of the Industrial Technical School. Most of the students had gone home for the vacations. Stephen walked into his room that he shared with his friend Rick. All he wanted was to sleep, and let no one dare even wake him up. He had to go to work in the evening. The guy worked at a nightclub as a bartender. He'd come to town 2 years ago. His father, mother, and 3 sisters stayed in the village. Stephen was the eldest child in the family. He had a hard time. His father was always making him plow and work in the mud, and his mother was always shouting, "Stephen, look after your sisters. Stephen, bring water. Stephen, firewood." Having finished 9 grades, he knew for sure that he had to go to technical school to leave the village and live a city life. And so it turned out to be. Now he studies, lives in the city, and works to have something to live on and go out with girls. Girls in the city are not like in the village. There you could finish any girl with a bouquet of wildflowers. And these urban myths like to party hard. Take this girl he spent tonight with. It is immediately obvious that she is from a rich family, definitely not poor and lives in such a beautiful house. Their village house, compared to the good ones from the branch, is a barn on chicken legs. I wonder who her parents are. Stephen fell asleep without even undressing. Why hadn't she given him her phone number? Evelyn stared out the window and wondered how she would ever see Stephen again. What did she know about him? Not much. Just that he's the coolest guy in the world and has a bike. Now it seemed to her that if she didn't see him again, she would simply die, cease to exist. She couldn't live without him. But it's impossible to find a man you know almost nothing about in the city. Even her father, for whom she thought nothing was impossible, wouldn't be up to the task, nor would she want to involve him. The girl's mother came into the room. "She's awake. Come downstairs. I'll feed you senior year," she said. The mom set up lunch in the dining room. And it was strange, because they only ate in the dining room when they were all together. At dinner, Mom poured soup into a bowl. "Well, tell me about it." She smiled. Dad said, "Did you meet a boy?" "Yes, Mommy, I did. And he's very nice. We were on the roof with him, and the sky was so starry, just all sprinkled." "What roof?" "You could have fallen off. It's dangerous." Mommy was worried. But Evelyn laughed so hard she didn't want to lecture. "He and I also rode a bike through the city at night, and there was no one around," she continued. Looking at her happy face, Emily smiled too. "Just, I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I haven't even had a chance to find out anything about him. I don't have his cell phone number, or where he lives. I don't know. Just his name. And it's the most wonderful one. Stephen. But if he likes you too, he'll find you," Mom said. "Don't worry." Evelyn was relieved by her mother's words. In the evening, her friend Vanessa dropped by. They had been friends for a long time. They were in the same class and shared secrets. Kelly's parents had gone to live abroad. After graduating from high school, she had to leave too. In the meantime, she lived with her grandmother. They set up in the garden next to the swimming pool. Mom brought fruit and juice. She asked Kelly how her parents were doing. After receiving a formal answer that everything is fine, removed her friend, planted apples, and asked, "And where did you disappear yesterday?" "I searched you. You have no idea where I was until this morning." "Conspirators," Evelyn began. She told Vanessa everything in great detail, and even about her history with the guy. Her friend listened, eyes wide with surprise. "You're kidding. You don't know him at all. Sleeping with a guy you don't know very well, who you're seeing for the first time, and on a rooftop." "I'm shocked. You never seem like the crazy type." They both laughed. "Except now I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I'd like to go out with him and have him be my boyfriend and mine alone. But I don't know where to find him." "You're funny. What do you know about him?" A friend asked me. "What's his name?" "That he has a bike." And she didn't know anything else about Stephen. "Let's be logical," Vanessa suggested. "You met at a club, right?" So Evelyn didn't understand what Vanessa was getting at. "He probably goes there, right? So that's where we should look for him," she summarized. "What if he went there by accident and doesn't hang out there at all?" "I don't think so. Random people don't go to the club at night, or hardly at all. So there's a 99% chance that's where you'll find him. Let's go to the club on Friday. Maybe you'll get lucky." Evelyn cheered up. She had some hope that she would see Stephen again. The music was playing loudly in the club. The girls were seated at a table on a sofa. Evelyn stared intently into the crowd of dancers, trying to make out a familiar silhouette. Stephen wasn't in it. "I'll go order us a chick cocktail," her friend said, and headed for the bar. Evelyn followed her with a glance. Suddenly, she saw him behind the bar. He was walking around something by the glass. The girl couldn't believe her eyes. Finding Stephen, seeing him again, was easy. Turns out he works as a bartender at this club. Her heart rolled frantically. Trying to hide her excitement, she followed her friend to the bar. "Hey, Stephen," she tried to shout over the music. The guy looked at Evelyn. His gaze was confused, as if he didn't recognize her. "I'm Evelyn. And hi. How are you?" "I'm just here to hang out. I'm meeting a friend of mine. This is Vanessa." The friend looked at the light and the guy behind the bar in surprise. "What are you drinking?" asked Stephen. "Let's have a margarita," shouted Vanessa. The guy poured the cocktails and put a straw in each glass. Evelyn didn't know what to say or how to act. She just stared at him. "Girls, why don't you let us in?" There was a bunch of guys standing in the back. Apparently, they wanted to order too. The girls went back to their table. "That's your Stephen. Wow. He's the bartender. He works here. Apparently Vanessa was cooking, and Evelyn kept looking at the guy. She didn't understand his reaction. Was he not happy to see her? Look, he's all right. He's handsome. Now I see what you mean. I'd run away with a guy like that too. Kelly's words echoed. I need to talk to him, Evelyn said and headed for the bar. What exactly to say, she didn't know. Stephen, it's so good to see you, she began. I thought I'd never see you again. The earth is round, the guy replied. Sooner or later we would have met anyway. Maybe we could go for a walk sometime. When did you get off? Today until the morning. Behind the bar, Stephen spoke without looking at her, wiping his glass with a snow-white napkin. And tomorrow? Could we meet tomorrow? Evelyn asked. Or the day after tomorrow? A tall, slender brunette in a red dress that barely covered her firm buttocks approached the bar. Another strongman clash. Groan. Look, someday some daddy will show up and kick your ass. The brunette laughed. Tell me again. Look, I'm busy. So can I wait for you? Why? To go on that roof again, Evelyn said uncertainly. Suddenly, the brunette intervened in the conversation. Oh, you're begging for it too. Already got you on the roof. She laughed dearly. It's the roof. What a lot of girls I haven't seen. And all because the dorm is strict. The super doesn't let girls in his room. And Stephen's really into making out with girls. Yes, Stephen. Evelyn felt dizzy and her legs felt woozy. She looked at the guy and he pretended nothing was happening. So, you got a date. He gave you his phone number. Her friend peppered Evelyn with questions as she returned to their table. She didn't immediately notice that the girl was about to burst into tears. The will to cry she'd given on the street. The world had crumbled. She had fallen in love with a guy who didn't care. He wasn't going to date her at all, and wasn't happy to see her again. What a fool she was. Where were her brains when she climbed up on that damn roof? Vanessa tried her best to calm her friend down. Come on, I'm not crying. How many times? Yeah, it hurts. He turned out to be a common womanizer who goes through girls. But he's not the only Stephen on earth. You'll meet a great guy who'll love you. All right, come on. Translate. My face is all swollen and my mascara is smeared. But Evelyn didn't seem to be deterred. This was the first cruel and very painful disappointment of her life. Her heart was bursting with resentment to her grief. She realized more and more clearly that she loved Stephen and needed no one else. Evelyn, you can't do this. You haven't been out for a month, sitting at home alone. You're not into anything at all. Emily hugged her daughter, ran her hand through her loose hair. You should go to Vanessa's, take a walk together somewhere. Evelyn didn't really want to go anywhere and didn't want to see anyone. But Vanessa had come. Her voice rang out in the hallway. A moment later, she flew into the room. Hello, Aunt Emily. I'm here to see Evelyn. It's very good of you to come. She's sitting all alone. I'll bring you some donuts. She baked them herself this morning, and Evelyn hasn't even eaten one. Emily went into the kitchen. Vanessa managed to get her friend out for some fresh air. She was happily flying donuts, carefully brought by Emily, drinking juice. Very tasty. You should not eat it, she said. I don't want to. It makes me sick. Her friend stopped chewing and looked carefully at the branch. How long has it been? She asked, lowering her voice almost to a whisper. I don't know how long, Evelyn. A long time, I said. No, why? You're not the one who's not the one. Are you pregnant by any chance? When was your last period? Bought before prom. Vanessa put the donut back on the plate. Let's go, she tugged on Evelyn's arm. Where are you taking me? Get off. The girl resisted. Where to where? Let's go to the drugstore, buy a pregnancy test, and check everything at once. Evelyn stopped. Are you serious? She asked her friend. Her eyebrows went up. Of course I'm serious. You've slept with Stephen on the roof. And that can sometimes get you pregnant. She said indignantly. Couldn't Evelyn have thought of that? Delayed. Nauseous. It's been a month. It's clearer than I thought. But I'll have to check it out, just to be sure. Back from the drugstore, Evelyn locked herself in the bathroom. But what had Vanessa done in there? I couldn't wait to find out the result, but come out already. Something stuck in there. Evelyn stared at the test. It showed a clear two-stripe pattern. She's pregnant. What do I do? How do I tell their parents? She's having a baby. All sorts of thoughts went through her head, all with a question mark and not one clear answer. She came out of the bathroom, handed the test to Vanessa. She looked at the test. "Gotcha," she said. "You have to tell your father. He loves you very much. He'll figure out what to do." "He'll kill me," said Evelyn. "He won't. You'll see. But he'll kill your Stephen." Evelyn suddenly snapped out of her stupor. "Don't tell my father about Stephen. It's my own fault. Give me your word you won't." Vanessa wasn't sure she should swear not to give away the name of the scoundrel who wanted Evelyn Christopher. But no, he'd have to answer for what he'd done. "Sorry, girlfriend, I can't give you that word. No offense, but if they ask me about Christopher, I'll give that Stephen guy a piece of my mind." When Vanessa went home, Evelyn continued to sit on the bed, staring at the test. What had she done? In the evening, there was a serious conversation with her parents. At first, confused, Christopher pulled himself together and began the questioning. Who he is, where he lives, who his parents are, where he studies. "Where did you meet him? How long have you been dating?" "We are not dating," quietly said the daughter. "It was one time. It's getting worse by the hour. Where can I find him?" The father started to raise his voice. "Calm down, don't you see? Is your daughter upset at all?" Emily tried to calm her husband down. "Tell us everything, sweetie. Don't be afraid of anything." "There's nothing to tell," screamed Evelyn, jumping out of her chair. "There's nothing to tell. We just slept with him. I thought he liked me. That we were gonna date. Turns out I was just another girl in his life who fell for him like a fool. Daddy promises you won't do anything bad to Stephen. This is what I wanted. This is what I wanted. I wanted to have a baby at 17 and put my schooling on hold. I wanted to be a single mom. No, of course your mom and I will be there for you and support you. But this is so wrong. I can't even find the words. Who's that bastard? Tell me. Don't. Daddy, I don't want to hurt him. I love him. And I'm going to have a baby." That evening, everyone was thoughtful. In the morning, Evelyn didn't show up for breakfast, saying she had a headache. Emily poured a glass of water, pulled some pills from the medicine cabinet, and quietly entered her daughter's room. "Take a pill," she told Evelyn. She obediently took the medicine and drank the glass of water. "Daughter, talk to me. I see how you are suffering. And it's very hard to watch. Let's talk." "Mommy, I love him so much." "Who?" "The baby." "So it's not even born yet?" Mom asked in surprise. "No, I love Stephen. You don't know how good he is." "But my daughter, how can you know if he's good or not if you've only been with him once? You don't even know him at all." "No, I think I've known him for a long time. He doesn't know me. If we'd met a few times, he'd realize I'm kind and I love him very much." Of course, the sweet mom hugged Evelyn and cuddled her like she did when she was a little girl. A doctor's appointment revealed that there was a threat of miscarriage. "I would recommend an inpatient stay," the doctor said, putting her hands under the running water in the wash basins. "Tell me, doctor, is it possible to follow all the recommendations? Treatment at home? I do not want my daughter to lie alone in the hospital. We have all the conditions at home. You just tell us what to do. But it's up to you to do it at home. Give your daughter complete rest and no exertion. Good nutrition, more vitamins. I'll prescribe the drugs, buy them at the pharmacy. And most importantly, hear me out." The doctor looked at Evelyn carefully. "Don't be nervous, don't worry. Only positive emotions. And then everything will be fine. You'll have a healthy and beautiful baby on time." "Thank you." Evelyn and her mom went home after receiving the necessary recommendations. And in the evening, Emily turned to her husband. "I'm worried about Evelyn. She's so sad. She's worried about Stephen. And she shouldn't be nervous. The doctor said she needs positive emotions. I don't know what to do to make her happy. It's not working. I know, Christopher replied. What are you up to? The wife was worried. You'll see, it will be her positive emotions. Let's go to bed. It's late. Stephen did not immediately realize what a man is shaking him by the shoulders. He was sleeping off after the raucous party that he and his friends had yesterday. Who's that? What do you want? Sleepily he asked Amble the man, and started and moved aside. Now another man appeared in front of the head. He looked at the guy carefully, without taking his eyes off. Are you, I take it, Stephen? He asked. But Stephen, the boy, could not understand what he wanted from him. Remember Evelyn, the one you had fun with on the roof a month and a half ago? Stephen looked at the unexpected guest and did not understand anything. What Evelyn he'd been with on that rooftop. And some of them he hadn't even asked her name. What was going on? The man asked again, raising his voice. Do you remember her? I'm asking. Stephen began to come to his senses, scrolling mentally in his head. Who could it be? Evelyn, wasn't it the girl who came to his bar later? So naive and funny. Did she think he wanted to get serious with her? No, but she seemed nice, so pretty. He drove her to her house afterwards, surprised her. She must live pretty well. I remember. What do you want? Listen to me carefully. You marry her. Do everything to make her happy and cheerful and joyful. Have a baby. You can get the hell out of here. What baby? Again, I did not understand what you, Morozov, made her. Loudly and clearly said the man. And if I see even once in all this time that she is sad or, God forbid, crying, I strangled you with my own hands. No, I'd rather send you to the penitentiary for statutory rape. You know what they do to bastards like that there. Stephen shook his head. This is a stupid dream. He's gonna wake up. He's not going to marry anyone. And he doesn't know the girl at all. The man continued, You'll live with us, but forget your girls. 24 o'clock a day you'll be by my daughter's side to fulfill all her wishes. That's your main duty now. What are you talking about? Maybe I didn't knock her up at all. Stephen tried to deny it, but the man's strong hand was at his throat. And I'm not joking. The man threatened. Here's your money. It's for flowers and presents. She had surprises every day. Say that you regret that you did not go out with her, that only now you realized how much you love her, that you want to marry her. Do you understand me? Stephen stared in surprise at the wad of bills the stranger tossed carelessly on the table. Do you understand? He said uncertainly. When the man left the room, he took a long time to come to his senses. At home, the girls are rich, so they do not live poor. This is, apparently, her father. Who's the other one? Maybe a brother. No, probably a security guard or something. Like a bodyguard. Married. What a mess. The sun ravaged Evelyn's room. She opened her eyes and thought she didn't feel like getting up at all. The girl pulled the curtains and was stunned. And downstairs at the gate stood a familiar bike. And on the path to the house walked Stephen with a bouquet of flowers. It couldn't be. She threw on her robe and went downstairs quickly. Her mother opened the door, and on the threshold Evelyn saw her favorite boyfriend. Hello. He turned to Emily. May I see Evelyn? Come in, the woman invited. And who are you? My name is Stephen. I'm an acquaintance of Evelyn's. And you're her mom? Yes, Emily answered. At that moment the boy saw Evelyn standing at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at him in surprise. Hello, Evelyn. This is for you. Stephen handed the bouquet to the girl. I wanted to see you. Come in, quietly said the girl. They went into the living room. Mom took the bouquet in her hands. I'll put it in a vase. Do you have one? The young man Stephen looked around. He had never seen such luxurious surroundings. Yes, this house certainly does not compare with his village slaughterhouse. Stylish, beautiful furniture, expensive repairs, floor vases. Good living, he thought. Evelyn's father appeared in the room. Not understanding, Emily called him after all. The guy came to see his daughter. It is not possible without the father. Stephen stood up abruptly from the couch. Hello. Evelyn's father pretended to see him for the first time. I'm Stephen, Evelyn's friend. The girl looked at everything that was happening with an uncomprehending look. A friend, then? Asked the father. The boy hesitated a little. Well, as a friend. In general, I love your daughter and want to marry her. He said these words in one breath. He didn't expect that from himself. Wow, the father said. Look, mother, we have a groom. Well, let's get acquainted. I'm Christopher, Father Evelyn, and as you've already realized, the man invited the boy to sit down, and Evelyn and her mother remained standing. There was silence in the living room. Evelyn's mother decided to break the awkward silence. I'll go make some tea. Do you want tea or coffee? Young man. Coffee, please, answered Stephen. The woman went out. Evelyn. The guide turned to the girl. I just realized now. I've been thinking a lot. I did a really bad thing. Then at the bar, I realized you're the best girl in the world. You're the most beautiful and kind. It took me over a month to realize that. I'm sorry. I really want us to be together. Evelyn looked at him, and her eyes shone with happiness. She threw herself around Stephen's neck and hugged him, and he kissed her. Evelyn's father decided to intervene in this idyll. So, and no one wants to ask me if I'm going to let you guys date with such far-reaching plans. Evelyn ran up to her father. Daddy, honey, I love him very much, and he loves me too. You heard him. He loves me too. Now we're going to be together. We'll see, Christopher said thoughtfully, and walked away, leaving the boys alone. I thought I would never see you again, Evelyn said. I'm sorry, I was such a fool, answered Stephen. I don't take offense. No, at first I was angry and mad at you, but then I realized that I can't hold grudges for long. And also, Stephen, we are going to have a baby. Stephen made a surprised face. It's true. A smile and a faint semblance of joy lingered on his face. Yes, it's going to be our baby, you and I. Ours, you know. Our continuation of love. Evelyn could not believe that her beloved had come to her, confessed his love, and even wanted to marry. She had forbidden herself to even think about it before. And now they will always be together. And soon they will have a baby boy. Emily set the table in the garden, put a beautiful tea set, inviting the guests to the table. Looking into the living room, she called out to her daughter. When everyone was assembled, Christopher began the conversation. So, young people, we don't have much time. Or rather, you have a little. Soon you'll be able to see your belly from the branch. So since we are all gathered here, let's discuss your future. He paused from his cup of flavored coffee. Will you live? We're not even discussing that. We'll play the wedding year. We'll order an off-site registration banquet menu, and the guest list we'll take care of with Mom. Evelyn, order food and appetizers from the best restaurant and service to be top-notch. Find some musicians, and I'll arrange for the registration. It didn't take long. The wedding would be in a month. Evelyn was glowing with happiness. Looking at her, Christopher thought that he would do anything for his daughter, as long as she smiled. He decided not to say anything to his wife. It would be better that way. On the day of Evelyn and Stephen's wedding, the house was abuzz with activity from the very morning. The decorator arrived, waiters, musicians, and people Evelyn didn't know were scurrying about. It seemed that the house had become a big anthill where everyone had something to do. Everyone knew their tasks and carried them out. Vanessa, in a beautiful violet-colored dress, was arranging Evelyn's hair on her head, distributing the curls. The tiara will look very beautiful, she said. And jewelry in place. Let's get the dress on. I'll close the door so Stephen doesn't come in. It's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding. I don't believe in omens. I believe Stephen, and he says we'll be fine and live happily ever after. Vanessa corrected the dress on her friend, straightened the hem, and started to take the corset. Yes, friend, Have you started to get better yet? We bought the dress 2 weeks ago, and it's already tight. I didn't tighten it too much. It's fine. It's fine. She stood at the window and watched Stephen in a beautiful costume of a passing moose through the garden between the sculptures of angels. He must be worried, the bride thought. Mom came into the room. Well, girls, how are you ready here? She scrutinized her daughter. Evelyn looked marvelous. We are ready, but we are hungry, Vanessa complained. Go to the kitchen, you'll find something there, Emily suggested. And you, my daughter, are not hungry. Can I bring you something to eat? Evelyn refused. She didn't want anything. She couldn't wait to have a wedding ring on her finger. And she and Stephen were pronounced husband and wife. Soon, the guests began to arrive. Christopher and Emily met them in the courtyard. Among the guests were her father's partners, well-known businessmen in the city, deputies, and some people from the tax authorities, internal affairs, and many other people unknown to Evelyn. Finally, her father came up to the room. Daughter, we have to go out. Now the registration will begin. Solemn music was playing in the garden. Evelyn walked with her father to the presidium, where Stephen was already waiting for her. The bride was holding a small bouquet of tea roses. She smiled at the groom. The father passed his daughter's hand to the boyfriend, stepped back, and sat down next to Emily. The registration of Evelyn and Stephen's marriage began. They said the words of the vows they had learned beforehand. They exchanged rings and kissed. The guests clapped their hands, waiters ran in, handed out glasses of champagne and light appetizers. The newlyweds stayed among the invited guests for a while, and then secluded themselves in the garden. Stephen got a bottle of whiskey from somewhere. Evelyn seemed to be getting drunker and drunker. Maybe you shouldn't drink so much. The girl tried to take the bottle away from him. It's okay. I can drink at my own wedding. Of course you can, but why get so drunk? Evelyn's father, who was passing by, overheard the conversation. Daughter, may I steal your husband for a moment? Of course, Daddy. He took Stephen by the elbow and pushed him in the direction of the house. Listen, you asshole. What are you supposed to be doing? You're supposed to be entertaining Evelyn, not pouring alcohol into yourself. Christopher gripped Stephen's elbow tightly. Have you forgotten? Tell us. I haven't forgotten anything. The guy tried to justify himself behind his flying tongue. I just want a drink and ideas. And make sure that Evelyn does not have a single reason to be upset. Stephen wandered over to his young wife. They'd been living together for a month. If his father was to be believed, after the birth he should let Stephen go, and he would be able to live a free life again, to have fun and go out. Stephen has an unbearable urge to go to the club. That's where the fun is. And here it's not a wedding, but a gathering of some down-and-out bigwigs. But the rich man didn't spare any money for his daughter's wedding. He didn't want to fall in the mud in front of his partners. If they saw Stephen's relatives now, they'd all go crazy with luxury. How Stephen lived this month, they couldn't even dream of. Plenty of food. The house is beautiful and rich. The clothes he bought with his daddy's money. Let them pay for his, Stephen's, inconvenience, as if he had always dreamed of living with his daughter, who was also pregnant. When the entourage asked Stephen which of the guests would be coming from his side, the boy was confused at first, but the father immediately found something to say. Let's not invite them. It's a long drive. Parents are not old people. Why burden them? I'll send them presents, and then we'll invite them to visit. My daughter didn't argue. After all, she doesn't even know these people. Now she was only thinking about the fact that Stephen would soon marry her, and then their baby would be born. The subject of the groom's parents never came up again in the house. Stephen padded out to his and Evelyn's bedroom and collapsed on the bed. He slept until morning without taking off his suit and shoes. Stephen awoke to the aroma of coffee. Evelyn entered the room carrying a tray with 2 coffee cups on it. Wake up, I made us some coffee, she said, smiling. The boy's head was buzzing like an alarmed hive of wild bees. He struggled to get out of bed and took the cup his young wife held out to him. Thank you. You'd better give me a pill for my head. I've already taken care of you. There's a pill and a glass of water on the nightstand. I didn't realize you could get so drunk. I didn't realize what I was doing. I'm sorry, I must have been overexcited. Whether you just said it or just Stephen, I have to go to the women's health clinic today, Evelyn said. You're coming with me. As it turned out, Stephen had to not only give flowers and gifts to his wife, but also go with her to doctor's appointments. His father had explained that to him too. Of course I'll go, he said. I'll just take a shower and then we'll go. Great. Evelyn smiled. Then she went to get ready. Evelyn's pregnancy was going well, and there were no complications. She had already stopped throwing up, and that made Evelyn very happy. After the doctor, she wanted to go to the baby supply store. I really want to start buying everything for the baby, she told her husband. Too bad, it's considered bad luck. Oh, come on, it's no big deal. Come on, let's go through some stuff. I wish we knew whether it's a boy or a girl. Which one do you want more? Evelyn stopped and looked into Stephen's eyes. I don't care, he said, but he corrected himself. I mean, I care. I'd be happy with a son or a daughter, but a son is better. Why is that? Well, fathers have a better relationship with their sons. They can go fishing together, and you can teach your son how to ride a bike. Stephen laughed for some reason. That's a stereotype. My dad and I have a great relationship, and he taught me how to ride a bike. I never went fishing with him, though. They came home with bags full of stuff for the baby. Mommy, look what we bought, shouted Evelyn from the doorstep. Stephen threw the bags on the sofa in the living room and collapsed with his legs stretched out. Emily and Sveta began to sort through the purchases. What overshoes? They are only interested in clothes, the boy thought. Soon his studies at his technical school would begin, and he would be able to leave this house for a while and not see his wife. How much he was fed up with her instructions. Sweet, sweet kitty, bunny. I'm sick to death of it. The labor began in the night. Evelyn suddenly screamed, and Stephen woke up. What? What happened? He mumbled. It seemed to have begun. The girl cried out in pain. Hurry up and call Mom and Dad. Father and Mother ran into the room. Hush, daughter. It's all right. Emily said, Father, why are you standing there? Let's get the car out of the garage. Christopher ran down the stairs. Mom, why does it hurt so much? It's normal, honey. It'll be over soon, and everything will be fine. Emily reassured her daughter. Come on, get up slowly and let's go downstairs. We're going to the hospital. Stephen, take a bag of things for the hospital from the closet. The confused Stephen rushed to the closet, grabbed the bag, and followed his wife and mother-in-law. At the hospital, Evelyn was placed on a gurney and wheeled down a long hallway. The nurse on duty softly addressed the relatives. You go home. First labor. It won't be quick. When it's over, she'll call you. Christopher went over to her. He took a bill out of his jacket pocket, slipped it into the woman's hand. Please call me as soon as you know everything. How she gave birth, who was born. He asked the nurse and held out a business card. Of course, she said. Don't worry. I will definitely call you. That night there was a commotion in the maternity hospital. They brought in a woman who had gone into labor right outside. She had no papers on her. The woman gave birth to a baby girl and died. The doctors couldn't save the mother's life, and then they brought in a young girl. She screamed with pain and even cried. On examination, it turned out that the uterus did not open, and the child was lying across. It was necessary to urgently make a cesarean section, but the anesthesiologist on duty was busy in another department. At the operation, the girl was given an anesthetic injection. They started to prepare for surgery and waited for the anesthesiologist to be available. Because of complications with the surgery in the other department, he was delayed so much, time was lost. Evelyn's daughter was stillborn. In the emergency room, the nurse on duty sat and thought. She did not dare to call the girl's father and tell him that the baby had died. But she had to do it because she had promised him and he had paid her well. She dialed the number on the card. "Hello, Christopher. It's the nurse from the delivery room. Where are you going?" Emily asked her husband, who was suddenly going somewhere. "I have an urgent business to attend to," he answered, hiding his eyes. "What urgent business? Our daughter is giving birth." The woman was indignant. "By the way, did you call from the hospital?" "No, they didn't. I'll be right back." Christopher closed the door behind him, not understanding anything. Emily watched out the window as he drove out of the gate and sped away. Evelyn's father waited for the doctor in the emergency room. Finally, he was invited in and told where the office of the head of the maternity ward was. "Hello. How did this happen? Why didn't you save the baby?" he asked a woman with glasses who was sitting behind a desk in the office. "Sit down, please," she said calmly. "It's a force majeure. Your daughter had a transverse fetal movement. The uterus wouldn't open. We had to operate. Unfortunately, the baby didn't survive. Her heart couldn't take it. I'm so sorry." Christopher lowered his head. He wondered what would happen to his daughter when she found out about the trouble. Stephen would be gone too. The man had prepared for that. He realized that the girl would be upset, but her child would be there, and caring for him should help her recover from her husband's departure. But what about now? More than anything else in his life, he wanted his daughter to be happy. The door to the study opened quietly. "Anna Igorovna, sign the documents for," quietly asked a young nurse. "Come back later," the woman replied. The meaning of the words suddenly came to Christopher. Not bodies, but bodies. "What's wrong with my daughter?" he shrieked, jumping out of his chair. "Is she dead?" The doctor quickly got up and waved his hands. "Calm down. She's fine. She is now in the intensive care unit. Will soon come to her senses." Anna Igorovna handed him a glass of water. "Here, drink. Calm down. It's another woman in labor died." A woman was picked up from the street by kind people and brought right to the bus stop. "She went into labor. What was she sick for?" asked the man from the water. "No, not sick, just weak. Now we will never know what happened to her, how her life punished her. But I feel sorry for the girl. 3 kicks, 9 points. Dad, what little girl?" Evelyn's father asked. "Like the girl her daughter gave birth to and died. Couldn't save her." Christopher grabbed the superintendent's hands, began to shake, begging, "Please give this girl to us, as if she were my daughter. We'll raise her. She won't need anything." "What are you talking about?" The doctor tried to wrestle her palms from his hands. "It's illegal. I'll pay. How much do you want?" "Any amount. Just register the baby as ours. I'm begging you. If you don't, my daughter will go crazy." The doctor sat down on the chair. "She's thinking. She hadn't signed the body papers yet. In principle, it could be done in a way that wouldn't hurt a mosquito. But what about the staff? Everyone on shift that night saw the man's daughter's baby die. The midwife, the anesthesiologist, the nurse. She took a small piece of paper, wrote 4 sums on it, showed it to Christopher. The man did not hesitate for a moment, said he would bring the money soon, and quickly left the office. He drove home gloomier than a cloud. He was not completely sure whether he had done the right thing in buying it. Yeah. In fact, he had bought for his daughter a living child, a girl who had been born to some woman from the street. If you think about the meaning of what he did, it's scary. But he won't say anything to anyone. No one will know anything. Everything will be fine. After all, what future awaits this child? An orphanage, poverty, no loved ones, and they'll love her as if she were their own. "Didn't they call from the maternity hospital?" asked her husband Emily when he appeared on the threshold of the house. "They did," he replied. "Our Evelyn gave birth to a baby girl." "Oh, what a joy!" Emily exclaimed. "What time? What's the weight, height?" "I don't know. But how could you? You didn't even ask." "I'm sorry, I got confused. And I was driving." Christopher excused himself. "I'll call the hospital right away," his wife hurried. "No, don't," he stopped her. Let's go there a little later. We'll find out for ourselves. Emily looked at her husband in surprise. He seemed strange. Mom and Dad and Stephen came to meet Evelyn at the hospital. They were waiting in the discharge room for the young mom to come in and bring the baby girl. Christopher placed a package on the table. It contained a bottle of good champagne handy. Stephen held flowers in his hands. "Here is our girl," said the nurse who entered the room. "Well, relatives, check if everything is in place. There are 5 toes on her feet and 5 toes on her hands." The baby lay quietly on the nurse's singing table and looked at the people bent over her. The nurse began to dress her. Evelyn entered the room. She wanted to look very pretty, so she lingered in the room, coloring her eyes and lips and styling her hair. "Daughter." Parents rushed to hug the girl. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine." Evelyn nodded and walked over to Stephen, hugged him. "Now you and I have a daughter. Look, I think she looks just like you." Stephen didn't. "She doesn't look like anybody. And how can a child who's only a few years old bear any resemblance to her parents?" In honor of the arrival of a new member of the family for dinner was set a festive table. The little girl slept peacefully in a crib in Evelyn and Stephen's bedroom. "What shall we call our granddaughter?" Mom asked Evelyn. "Yes, and really, Stephen, what do you think?" Stephen was silent. It was as if he could not hear the conversation at the table. All he could think about was that now he would be able to leave this house and go back to his merry, rambunctious life. The girls from the nightclub, his friends, he could ride his bike around town whenever he wanted. "Stephen, why don't you say something?" Evelyn looked at her husband carefully. Why, the guy did not understand her question. "I said, how are we going to name our daughter?" "But we decided. I don't understand anything about women's names." "Let's call her Car." Emily suggested it. "Oh no, what's a car?" objected Evelyn. "It's not a fashionable name at all. I want to call her Camille." "How does that sound?" "It's a good name," Christopher agreed. After dinner, Evelyn's father retired to the study. After waiting for a while, Stephen knocked on the door. "I want to talk to you." "Come out. I've fulfilled your condition, now I can be free." Evelyn had the baby, everything was fine. And all these months she's been happy, just like you wanted. Christopher went to the window. Stephen spoke about something that had been bothering him for a long time. The daughter has to breastfeed the baby. What if she loses her milk? What if she becomes depressed like when Stephen didn't want to go out with her? Thoughts of what to do after the birth when Stephen wanted to leave worried Christopher. But he kept chasing them away. "I have a proposition for you. You'll stay with us and live with my daughter for another year." "But no way." He's got his eyes out for his father-in-law. "Look, I'll pay you well. You can even buy yourself a small apartment. Think about it. It's not like you're ever going to buy your own place in the city working in a bar." Stephen thought about it for a while, then made up his mind. "Okay, a year is a year, but I'll go back to work at the nightclub. I'd rather be behind the bar than listen to a baby crying all night." Christopher had to agree when Stephen announced to Evelyn that he was going back to work. She was surprised. "Why would you do that? We have plenty of everything. And even if you do want to work and earn money, let me talk to Dad, and he'll get you a job at his trading firm." "No, I'll work in a bar," her husband objected, noticing that the girl was upset. He quickly corrected himself. "It's all for you and the girl. I'll be helping you during the day so you can rest more." Evelyn smiled. "How thoughtful you are. All right, work at your club, but we'll be together during the day." But very soon she realized that her ideas of happy parents, walking together with their daughter, playing with her and spending all their time together, were a mirage. Stephen came in the morning, often smelling of alcohol. He would sleep most of the day and then leave in the evening. One night, the daughter had a high fever. Evelyn did not know what to do. "We should call an ambulance," the mother said. "No, we don't. We'll take her ourselves. It'll be quicker that way," the father fussed. After dressing the girl, they got into the car and drove to the hospital. It was raining heavily outside, and lightning flashes lit up the night sky from time to time. Christopher was driving at high speed. Suddenly, he was blinded by the headlights of an oncoming truck. There was no way to avoid the collision between the SUV and the truck. Stephen arrived at the scene of the accident in the morning. He was not burning with love for the family, but when he saw his father-in-law's car and 3 black bags, which apparently contained the corpses of the father, mother, and their daughter, he was confused and felt a lump come up to his throat. The investigator approached the guy and asked, "Are you the son-in-law?" "Yes." "Tell me, is it them?" Stephen looked at the black bags on the roadside. "Yeah. Unfortunately, they're all dead. They didn't stand a chance. Head-on collision. And the speed, judging by the braking distance, was very high. I need to ask you a few questions. It's a formality." "I'm sorry, are you able to answer?" "Yeah," the kid answered. Camille was walking back from school through the square. She walked slowly, kicking the fallen leaves with the toe of her shoe. The girl didn't feel like going home at all. There was a drunken father, empty bottles, and hardly any food. She hardly ever saw him sober, but the worst was when he brought home drinking buddies. They'd yell all over the kitchen, swear, and sometimes fight. The neighbors would curse, bang on the radiator. "Tonight, Camille, we didn't sleep well because of my father's guests, who had an all-night party." "Camille, you could hear your father's voice from the room when she opened the front door." Stephen stepped out into the hallway, leaning against the door jamb. "Let's cook something. Something to eat. I'm hungry." Camille walked silently past him, shut herself in her room. She dreamed of graduating from high school, enrolling in a school, and leaving home, preferably a place to study away from her father. Now she would rest a little and go to the cafe, which was located in the neighboring house. There Camille worked part-time as a dishwasher. A kind neighbor aunt, knowing that they sometimes have a few days of food in the house is not in the house, put there. There the girl sometimes managed to eat something, and if she was lucky, her father too. She brought dried cutlets from behind the window, sandwiches. Camille didn't have a mom, or rather, the girl didn't know her. Her father said she died in a car accident with her parents. If her mom had been with her, if she had raised her instead of her father, things would have been different. How often did Camille think that? 16 years ago, Stephen's life changed abruptly. That day is questioned and investigator, after the accident that killed his father-in-law, mother-in-law, and Evelyn. The guy didn't immediately remember that his daughter's little girl was also supposed to be in the car. She was taken away in an ambulance. The investigator replied to his question about the baby. "So she is alive?" Stephen asked uncertainly. "Yes. Surprisingly, the baby survived. I think thanks to the fact that she was strapped in a baby car cradle. She's in the hospital now, but you can go there and pick up your daughter if the doctors allow it." "Pick her up where?" "Why? What will he do with her?" Stephen returned to the house where he had said goodbye to his unloved wife the night before and left for his shift at the nightclub. He couldn't have imagined then that the house would be completely empty in the morning. Yes, he didn't love Evelyn, but in the year he'd lived with her, the girl had become something close to him. What about the baby? Probably the daughter will be given to an orphanage. Stephen poured whiskey into a glass. The silence was broken by the trill of the telephone. The guy picked up the phone. "I'm listening." "Hello." A woman's voice on the other end of the line. "Hello, it's the hospital. Who am I talking to?" "I'm here about the girl who was brought to us today from the accident site." Her father Stephen said these words and was surprised at how clearly they sounded. "We examined the girl. She was not injured in the accident, but the child has bilateral pneumonia, so you can't take her home yet. We'll treat her, and then we'll take her home." "Yes. Can you bring the baby's things, feeding bottle and diapers?" "Yes, I will." "When are we waiting?" "Have a good day." The phone rang. Stephen drank from a glass and went to pack the girl's things to take to the hospital. On the shelves, everything was folded in perfect order: jackets, t-shirts, suits, onesies. Not paying attention to what things he was putting in his bag, he gathered everything on the shelf. He'd take it back tomorrow morning. He couldn't bear to get drunk, but he didn't want to drink alone. Stephen dialed the number of Wendy, with whom he had been partying all night at the club. "Lisa, come and see me. I'm so thirsty, but there's no one to talk to." Kodak answered with a cheerful voice in the phone. Stephen said the address, and an hour later, bright, carefree Wendy was already standing on the doorstep. She was wearing a tight dress with a deep neckline. Her precise figure beckoned. "Would you like a drink?" he asked the girl. "But pour." He plumped down on a soft armchair and put his leg over the leg. "Tell me, what happened to your wife? Did you have a fight with your wife, or your father-in-law offends you?" "They are no more," Stephen said, holding out a glass to his friend. "What do you mean gone? Did you kill them and bury them? You've got to be kidding me." She laughed, finding her joke very successful. "They were in an accident tonight. All three of them died." The girl stopped laughing. "How awful," she said quietly. Stephen understood that he had to attend to the funeral, but he understood nothing at all about the process, and there was no one else to bury his wife and her parents. "And you call the secretary, Evelyn, the father?" "Usually rich people have secretaries or personal assistants to take care of everything," Wendy suggested. "Right. Why didn't he think of that?" Christopher's secretary already knew what had happened. "I called and informed John Ward, Christopher's right-hand man." She suddenly went quiet. She didn't say much. Ex-arm, it turns out. He promised to arrange the funeral. Stephen breathed a sigh of relief, filled his glass with whiskey again, and poured Wendy a refill. "Listen, so you're going to live here now?" she asked admiringly. "It's a nice place. A house like this, like a palace, like a palace, like a palace." "I don't know," Stephen answered indifferently. "What do you mean you don't know? Where are you bringing your daughter? To the dormitory of your technical school, or what? And she is the heiress of all this, and it is rightfully her home. And you're her father, so you should live here." Stephen never thought of that. It's true. Camille is heir to everything that belongs to the family, but he's also the heir to his wife, Evelyn. So, what, he's going to enjoy his father-in-law's fortune legally, and not have to live in a dorm with cockroaches. Stephen's already imagining trading in his bike for a cool car, marrying a cool girl, even Wendy. What about her? Skater. She's fun. You can sit in a club with her, you can sit in bed with her. She's a total class act. And the kid can get a babysitter. Stephen's imagination painted a rosy picture of the future. "Wendy, will you marry me?" The girl laughed, plumped on his lap, and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Why not?" Stretching the words slightly, she said, "You are now an enviable groom at our place." After the funeral, Ward's late father-in-law's right-hand man took the boy aside. "We need to talk about the inheritance, the business, and a few things. Is it convenient for you to come to the office, or should I come to you with the documents myself?" "I'll come," Stephen said. Stephen had never been to Evelyn's father's farm. The secretary ushered him into the office, which was furnished with expensive furniture. "So this is where Christopher ran his business from. This is where he made his money." A couple minutes later, Ward entered the office. He was holding a red folder. "Well, once again, my condolences on the death of the family." He spoke in a calm voice. "But formalities in business cannot be delayed." Ward opened the folder and looked up at Stephen. "Do you have any questions?" "No." "Then I'll get started." Christopher left some orders that pertain to his estate. I guess he didn't intend to die, but he made the basics official. All real estate and assets of Herm's trading company passed to his wife and daughter in the event of Christopher's death. But in our case, there are none. Then legally the sole heir is Camille, your daughter. And I wondered, boy, can I inherit my wife's share? The wife Christopher and his daughter Evelyn had no further allocation. In fact, they owned nothing. So you have nothing to inherit. But since you are the father of the only and minor heiress, which cannot enter into the rights of inheritance due to age, until her majority can dispose of the property, that is, the house of the car as well as the profits of the company. Do you understand? Stephen seemed very clear. He will live in the house. His father-in-law's car will also go to him. He would get the money from the firm's account. He was fine with that. Who will manage my late father-in-law's affairs? He asked him. The firm belonged to Christopher. It was true. But the authorized capital was divided between him and me and another co-founder. So now the affairs of the firm will be managed by me and him. If you don't trust us, you can have us audited. No, I trust you completely. Stephen didn't understand anything about his late father-in-law's business and didn't want to burden himself with unnecessary worries. He was content to spend the profits as he saw fit. I don't pretend to run it. I understand. Let me digress and lead you now. Business. The man rose and left. Stephen followed him. On the way, he dialed Wendy's cell phone. Come, you know the address. Anything to celebrate. Soon a cab stopped in front of the house and Wendy jumped out of it. High heels on the path, she hurried towards the house. What, is there any good news? She asked Stephen. Well, whether it's good or not, I don't know yet. In general, listen, all the profits from the firm of my late father-in-law, my ears are now at my disposal. And a car at home. Wow, that's really good news. But I guess there's bad news. I'm supposed to be the baby's father. Well, you are the father. So the girl didn't get it. I'm supposed to be a real father, raise her, live with her, all that stuff. I don't know, daycare, school rides. What else do kids need? Well, your little girl's just a baby. All she needs is a meal, a diaper change, a walk with the stroller. Wendy didn't have any parenting experience either. It was not difficult for them to hire a nanny for the girl. On the appointed day, she came to the house. Wendy showed the woman the girl's room, the kitchen, and the living room. It was decided that she would live with them. She was a foreigner. It was even better, for the nanny would be near the child all the time, and she and Stephen could go about their business and enjoy life. When Camille recovered, Wendy and Stephen went to pick her up from the hospital. The new parents paid almost no attention to the girl at all. She was with the nanny all the time. In the evening, they would leave to go clubbing. In the daytime, they would rashly drive around the city looking for fun places, restaurants with delicious food, and without hesitation, spend money. Technical school, Stephen dropped out. Why study when you have several retail establishments working for you at once? Sometimes he had to go grocery shopping. He bought according to the list prepared for him by the housekeeper. Wendy absolutely refused to stand at the stove, and they hardly ever ate at home. The groceries were mostly bought for baby food. Growing up, Camille. Stephen. The girl's nanny approached him one day. Would you please allow me to leave at 200 hours? I need to go to the drugstore very urgently. Stephen was enjoying himself on the sofa in the living room. The woman's request had taken him by surprise. He didn't want to sit with Camille for even 15 minutes, and it was 2 o'clock. And Wendy, as it happened, was out shopping again. I'll try to be back very soon. The nanny looked at him. I beg you, with her eyes. Go. Stephen had no choice but to let the woman go. Just feed the baby. Now dress it. Yes, of course I will. Thank you very much. After all, Camille is no longer a baby. She just turned 3. To play in the garden. Stephen took Camille out into the yard standing. He told his daughter, I'll go and get some toys. The girl remained obediently standing in the yard. When Stephen came out of the house, he saw a terrible picture of the girl lying on the grass, and she was dragged like a doll across the lawn by a huge dog. Stephen rushed to his daughter. Get out, he shouted, hitting the dog on the back with a child's trowel. He lifted the little girl into his arms. She didn't even cry. At first, Stephen thought she was dead, but the girl moaned softly and apparently fainted from fright. Her face was covered with blood. There was a gaping laceration on her cheek. Stephen carried the girl into the house, put her on the couch, began to rush around the room looking for the phone. Soon the child was bitten by a dog. She's covered in blood. What's a 3-year-old child? Please hurry. The ambulance took Stephen and the baby to the hospital. The girl was quickly taken somewhere on a gurney. Stephen was left waiting in the emergency room. Where did that damn dog come from? How could this happen to the girl? She's just a little girl. Of course, she couldn't have handled it. She couldn't run away from the dog. And she doesn't understand anything yet. He was tormented by guilt. But why? Why had he left the child alone in the yard? Probably because he knew it was safe for the baby behind the high fence. But how could the dog have gotten into the territory? And that's when Stephen realized it was probably the babysitter. When she left, she didn't see the dog run into the yard. But he's gonna give her a good one. The girl was operated on and stitched up, but they wouldn't let her out of the hospital. She needed it. Medics and dressings. Stephen was advised to go home, so he called a cab. When he returned, he found the nanny at home. First yelled at her and chased her away without pay for the days already worked this month. When the woman left, he started to dial the beast, but she entered the house herself with her arms full of packages from the stores. This event greatly shook Stephen. Practically before his eyes in his own home, a stranger's dog had nearly chewed his daughter to death. Stephen, it's going to be all right. The doctors will take care of it. Don't worry about it. Wendy, don't you understand? She's my daughter. She's small, thin, defenseless. I can't imagine what it must have felt like to be dragged across the lawn by a monster like that. 2 weeks later, the girl was released from the hospital. She had a huge scar on her cheek. It made the little girl's face look a little twisted. Stephen looked at his maimed daughter with horror. Suddenly, he had a strong desire to hug her, to hold her close to him. He stroked her hair, saying everything will be all right. A new nanny had been found for Camille. Stephen hadn't been to a nightclub for a month, which Wendy didn't like. That we're always at home. I'm sick of it. Let's go out. The end. Look, if you want to go, you can go. Okay. I want to be home. Let's go. She sat on his lap, kissed him. Stephen thought it might be a good idea to go. Who'd be the worse for wear? In a month, there had been changes at the Warden. One of the interior rooms was renovated and turned into a casino. That's cool. I've only seen casinos like that in movies. Stephen looked around in admiration. I told you, let's go to the club. And you refused. Let's try our luck. Stephen's eyes glistened in anticipation of gambling and winning. He did get lucky at first. A mountain of chips was already lying in front of him, and a satisfied Wendy was laughing merrily, willy-nilly. One by one, the glasses of champagne came down. The excitement took Stephen completely. I bet everything loudly, he said. Strangers standing around the table supported him approvingly. But this time, luck apparently did not leave the room for long. Stephen lost all the chips he had won earlier. Shit, the guy cursed. I've been lucky all this time. He took a glass of cognac from under the nose of a passing waiter and drank it in one gulp. Stephen and Wendy spent the rest of the night at the club. At home, they found themselves at dawn drunk and rattled off to sleep. Stephen started frequenting the casino. The game was so addictive that he couldn't deny himself the pleasure of going to play. One morning, he was awakened by the loud trill of the telephone. Fumbling for the receiver on the bed, he struggled to answer. Who is it? Stephen, hello, it's Ward. I've got something to talk to you about. You can come to the office. What's up? Why? Stephen didn't understand. Just come by. I'll be expecting you today. After a shower, a cup of coffee, Stephen drove to the firm's office. Ward was sitting in the office. The secretary invited the guy in, and he entered. Have a seat, Libkin invited. He wrote something on a piece of paper, finished it, put it aside. Checking the accounts showed that you spend huge sums of money and spend it not on the upbringing of a girl legitimate heir to her father's fortune, and lose in the casino. This is unacceptable. It's none of your business, snapped Stephen. You're wrong. It is my business. I could support the girl myself, or I could give you a limited amount of money, and invest the profits in the development of the business. By the time Camille came of age, I could provide her with a steady income for the rest of her life. I don't understand what you want me to do. I want you to stop living a bad life. Get a job and raise your daughter properly. Otherwise, I will be forced to deal with this matter drastically. Fuck you. Stephen stood up abruptly and headed for the door. The young man said to Ward after him, I advise you to take my words seriously. Stephen walked out without looking back, slamming the door loudly. Freak, he said softly in the waiting room. A month later, Stephen had no money to pay for a babysitting pen. He sold his late father-in-law's car, which stood idly in the garage. Stephen himself never got his driver's license, putting it off until later. He was satisfied with a bike or a cab. After collecting all the cash he had, he went to the club. He's gonna get lucky tonight. He knows it. He will win a lot of money, and until the next dividends from the company, he will live peacefully. But luck turned against him this time. Stephen lost every penny. Staggering from the alcohol he drank, he went to the exit. Caught a cab. The driver had to wait a long time for a passenger to bring him money from the house. He didn't have a ruble in his pockets. He slept through lunch. He was all wrinkled, unshaven, and smelling of booze, and went into the kitchen. Nanny was feeding Camille. Stephen. She turned to the girl's father. You must have forgotten. Yesterday was the first of the month. You promised to pay me for last month. Stephen looked thoughtfully out of the window. The snow was falling quietly. Where is Wendy? He asked the nanny. She's gone somewhere. Said she'd be back tonight. So I'll decide about the money today, Stephen said, and left the kitchen. That afternoon he shook out the box of things, threw all the stuff in the pantry. There was his mother-in-law's jewelry from the branch to the wedding ring, and the gemstone tiara his father had given his daughter for her wedding. Where did they go? Finally, the jewelry was found. The guy rode them into a box. The pawn shop gave much less for the jewelry than it was worth. But Stephen needed the money. In the evening, he waited for Wendy. When the girl came back, he told her they had no more money. You've lost it all again. Wendy resented him. What are we gonna live on now? This wasn't our deal. I know, but it's Ward's fault. Stephen justified himself. He's the one who's cutting off my oxygen. He wants to leave my daughter without an inheritance. I don't care. You better think about how we're gonna live. Look at the cracks and branches on things. Maybe we can sell something. We could. Enough for the first time. Then I'll figure something out. That month we sold fur coats, evening gowns, some other things. They were followed by Chinese paintings, China. And then Stephen started selling off appliances, never giving up hope of winning money. He took everything he made to the casino. Sometimes he won, but not much. Mostly he went home with empty pockets, looking at the slender guy, the croupier, quietly, so that others could not hear, said, "Need money? I can help you." He signaled Stephen to follow him. In a small room at a table sat a man about 45 years old, croupier. He said something softly to him and walked out. So you're thinking of getting even? You want the money? Yeah, I'm gonna get lucky. I'll win and I can pay it back. Can you help me? I did. Why not help a regular customer? The man opened the desk drawer and took out several wads of bills. Look, when you win, don't forget to pay me back. Sure, I'll pay you back. Stephen scooped up the money and hastily plowed through his pockets. That night he'd lost everything he'd borrowed from the casino owner. Security threw him out the door like a dog. And in the morning, 3 cops broke in. They beat him badly, told him to bring the money back in 3 days at the latest. They hired them. The girl, seeing all this, was scared out of her wits. Would you excuse me, Stephen? She said, handing him a napkin to wipe the blood on his broken lip. But I don't want to stay in a house that could be broken into by bandits at any moment. I'm leaving. Stephen started to call Wendy, but her phone was out of range. What a bastard, he cursed, always out when he needed to be. Little Camille looked out of the room. The girl quietly walked down the stairs and sat on the living room floor. She must have needed something to feed her. Stephen began to open the kitchen cupboard doors one by one. There was almost nothing in them. Some cereals, salt, sugar, more pasta. There was some sausage and a few eggs in the refrigerator. "Camille, do you want some sausage?" the father asked his daughter. She nodded. He cut off a piece of sausage and handed it to the little girl. He had to find a way to get some money. A cab pulled up in front of the house and Wendy arrived. "Where are you?" Stephen asked. "Yeah, I slept over at a friend's house. We talked late. She's from out of town, from a resort," Wendy bequeathed. "Stephen, let's go somewhere else." "See, son, 5-star hotel." "Yeah, you wish. Where would I get the money?" Wendy noticed the guy's broken face. "Who did that to you?" she asked fearfully. "Have you been beaten up? Where have you been?" "Now you don't have to go anywhere to get a face like that," Stephen retorted angrily. "It's a house call." He told Wendy all about the money he had borrowed from the casino owner. She listened in silence and then grabbed her head. "Shit. What are we going to do? How are you going to pay it back?" "That's a lot of money." "I don't know. The only thing we can do is sell the house." "Stephen, there's no other way. We'll have to go through someone we know. They won't give us much because of the urgency, but maybe we can get a 2-bedroom in the suburbs." "Are you crazy? Do you have any other options? Or do you want to lie in the woods digging in the snow? They're really gonna kill you." "Yeah, you're probably right. There's no way out. I'm gonna go to the warden tonight, see if I can talk to the landlord. Listen, I need something to feed the mink. It's hungry. It's already eaten the sausage." Wendy got some cookies out of her bag, handed the girl some food, but at least it was a snack. The debt was settled, and I didn't even have to sell anything. Stephen simply redid the title deeds and moved into a barracks on the outskirts of town, which the club owner gave him in return. The club with a casino, bar, and dance floor was not the only business for Robert in this city. He created his empire from scratch. First opened a small cafe on the waterfront, gradually developed a whole network of restaurants. In parallel with the business, Robert was engaged in charity work. He helped kindergartens, schools, orphanages, believing that he who can give something to those who are now difficult must do it. Robert had no family of his own. His mother died a few years ago. She was an authoritative and strong woman who always knew what to do. She cared deeply for her son. She always knew how to insist on her opinion. And it must be said, most of the time Robert agreed with her. The only time they didn't agree was once. Robert and his friends were celebrating his 40th birthday at a restaurant. There was a lot of noise, a lot of fun, a lot of eating, a lot of drinking. Everyone wanted to congratulate such a successful man. Some came and some went in the room at a table by the window. Robert noticed a girl, modestly dressed, but something attracted his eye to her. Some kind of breed or something. That's what they usually say when a girl knows how to hold her own. Robert gestured to the waiter. "What's your favorite dessert?" "Tiramisu, I guess. Especially girls like it very much," answered the quick waiter. "Bring fruit, desserts, and a glass of champagne. At that table over there." "You got it. Will do." The waiter went to fulfill the order. When he put everything on the table, the girl looked around in surprise. There were no familiar faces around. "I didn't order this." "Did you make a mistake?" "No, this is from the man for you." Looking in that direction, Nancy saw a stately man in the company. They were clearly celebrating something. The man smiled at her. Later, he came over to introduce himself, asked if he could sit down. Not in the rules. Nancy meets in restaurants, but somehow this man didn't seem threatened or disliked. "It's my birthday today." "Congratulations, I guess your friends are waiting," the girl asked. "It's not nice to leave guests behind. They'll have a good time without me. I'd like to run away somewhere less noisy. I suggest we run away together." Nancy hesitated for a moment, then decided to accept the man's offer. They walked along the promenade, talking about something, as if they had known each other for a long time. Nancy was easy and fun with Robert. She didn't immediately notice that they were constantly followed by a black car with tinted windows. "That's my security. Don't worry," the man explained. "Not without it, unfortunately. Those are the rules. If we run away from them, the whole town will be on alert." "Are you a bandit?" the girl asked. "Why would I be a bandit? I'm just building and developing my business. I want and know how to make money." Nancy had a strange feeling. She is a student of philology. He's a grown man with experience. And there is no barrier to communication. She felt very comfortable and at ease. When Nancy found out she was pregnant, she didn't know how to tell Robert, but she already loved him. True, he hadn't confessed his love to her. The next weekend, he invited her out of town to a boarding house. He said there was a lake with swans. She would definitely make up her mind. Tell him that she would have a child, and be what it would be. She was thoughtfully pulling picnic food out of the basket. "Are you looking a little sad today, or is it just me?" Robert asked, putting his arm around her shoulders and looking into her eyes. "It wasn't. I'm pregnant," the girl whispered faintly. The man continued to look at her, remained silent, and then pressed her tightly against him. "You have no idea how happy I am. You gave me a child, a son or a daughter. This child will definitely be like you, just as beautiful, just as kind. So you don't want me to have an abortion. Don't even think about it. I love you so much." They had a wonderful weekend. Nancy was happy. When they arrived home, the man told his mother, "Mother, I've met a girl, and I'm going to marry her. She's the best in the world. I feel like a boy in love." The woman sat down next to me. "I'm so happy for you. Tell me, who is she? What family is she from? How old is she? But why do you care?" "The main thing is that I love her." And yet her mother insisted, "I want to know everything about her. She's a student. She's 20 years old. She has no parents. They died a long time ago." "Who raised her?" "The orphanage, Mom," Robert said firmly. "But what does it matter?" "It matters a lot. You have no idea how many problems there are with this orphanage, with this brat, with these orphans. They're ill-mannered, and they often become delinquents and criminals." "Mom, I don't want to hear it. What kind of nonsense is this? Next weekend, wait for us. I'll introduce you by lunch. The most beautiful girl in the world." When Robert and Nancy arrived on the doorstep, the mother could barely contain herself from showing her displeasure at her son's choice. "Meet my mom, Jenna. And this is Nancy." "Nice to meet you, Rabena," the girl said, smiling. "Come on in." The woman looked her over from head to toe. Her gaze was prickly, unfriendly, though she tried to hide it. A table with a snow-white tablecloth was set in the living room. Beautiful dishes and wine glasses were arranged. Robert poured a dry red wine into each glass. "Baby, try this salad. This salad is delicious." The man's mother tried to fill the awkward pause. "Thank you." Piatenko said, "You're studying at the institute. And what will you be?" "I want to work as a teacher of Russian language and literature. I love children." "Yes, a teacher. Well, it's a noble profession. But it doesn't pay much." "Mom, come on. I'll make money for everything. I'll have enough money. And to live decently. And to raise my children." "Are you thinking of having children already, Paula?" Mother asked jokingly. Robert and Nancy looked at each other. The girl stopped chewing and lowered her eyes. "Nancy is our mom, and there will be a baby." A sepulchral pause hung over the beautifully set table. Then the woman rose and walked out of the living room. "Don't worry about it." She was just taken aback. Such unexpected news. Robert tried to calm Nancy down. "Next weekend, I'll move you here. We'll live together. Start packing." "I don't have much to pack," she smiled. Nancy's relationship with Robert's mother was complicated. The woman made no secret of her displeasure with her son's choice. She pointed out at every opportunity that Nancy was not brought up properly, that because of her she could not invite respectable people to the house, that she was a beggar. Nancy was a pauper and lived with Robert only for money. The girl tried to spend as little time as possible in front of her mother-in-law. The pregnancy was going normally. At the last ultrasound, they said that she and Robert would have a girl. They were both overjoyed. "She will be as beautiful as you," said Robert, stroking her tummy. "But then you will definitely have to give me a son too, so that he will be the successor of my business." "I want at least 3 children," Nancy replied. When there are many children in a family, joy, noise, constant fun, some kind of trouble that becomes the meaning of life. And I don't mind. He was silent for a little while, and then he said, "Tomorrow, I must go to the capital. A very good deal seems to be piling up. But how will I stay here alone? And what if I go into labor?" "You're not alone. You're with my mom. Yeah, she's not an easy person, but she's not gonna leave you in a situation like this. She'll help you. But I think it's gonna be okay. I'll be back in time for the birth, and I'll take you to the hospital myself." Robert kissed her, told her not to be afraid of anything. "I'll be calling you so often I'll still have time to bore you," he laughed. In the morning, Nancy walked Robert to the door to say goodbye. She hated to let him go. She had a bad feeling about him. The girl went into the kitchen to pour tea. Suddenly, she felt dizzy. Nancy's staggered footsteps hit a porcelain statue. It fell to the floor and shattered. Robert's mother rushed into the room at the noise. "Oh my God," she screamed. "What have you done? Crooked wretch. This statue was brought to me from Japan by my late husband, the father of the song. You've earned nothing in this house, brought nothing here and bought nothing for the family. And the bashing is already here." She continued to yell, but Nancy didn't care. She felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. Screamed C, holding onto the countertops with one hand. "You're such a cunt." Her father-in-law grabbed her arm and almost dragged her toward the door. "Get out of here so I don't see you again." The woman pushed Nancy out the door and slammed it shut. The girl felt the pain let go. Quietly she walked, not realizing where she was going or why. Periodically her stomach began to ache again. How long she wandered around the city, Nancy did not know. It was already dark outside, no one around. She sat down on a bench at the bus stop and only now felt very cold and some liquid running down her legs. A car passed by. She braked sharply and backed up. A guy and a girl jumped out of the car. "You're sick. What's wrong with you?" "She's pregnant." Some fragments of phrases came to Nancy's consciousness. The guy took off his jacket, threw it over her and helped her into the car. So Nancy was taken to the maternity hospital. When Robert returned from his trip and did not find his beloved at home, he sternly asked his mother where she was. "It's not enough that I don't end up with her. How do I know where that beggar's Ford is? Probably where her father is. You rarely do." "Shut up." Robert was furious. All the next day, he called hospitals, morgues, asked people on the street, showed the photograph. But the girl was nowhere to be found. She disappeared without a trace. Her belongings, notebooks, books, and a purse with her passport in it were left in her room. Camille had a celebration at school. In the assembly hall, the teachers were bustling about. Back and forth, the principal started. Camille was to read a poem from the stage. She liked poems, but she didn't like to perform. She was embarrassed by the scar that the dog had left on her face. But the class teacher said that Camille should perform. She reads very heartfelt poetry better than anyone else, and the event is very important. The sponsors are coming. They'd donated 2 new computer labs to the school. Everyone and everything should enjoy it. When it was her turn to speak, Camille went on stage, stood at the microphone, looked into the hall filled with spectators. In the front row sat the principal with strangers in jackets. Camille began, "Don't you love me? Don't you pity me? Am I not a little handsome? You don't look me in the face. You put your hands on my shoulders in passion." Robert suddenly looked closely at the 9th grader. Something about her was painfully familiar, dear, close. What a terrible scar. What could have happened to this girl? He remembered how once long ago his beloved Nancy had also quietly read poetry to him. He who loved cannot love. He who is burned cannot be set on fire. The girl finished reading. Applause broke out in the hall. Did you like it? The principal asked Robert. Yes, she read well. And who is this girl? A very good student, kind, calm. Her parents are unlucky. Her father is a single parent. But it's hard to call it upbringing. After the concert, Peter told the head of his security service, find out everything about this girl. Everything you've heard, where she was born, who are her parents. I need any information, especially about her relatives' father, mother. I also found out where she lives. Got it. I'm on it. Robert couldn't get rid of the obsession all day. A sense of déjà vu. That fragile girl on stage looked a lot like his Nancy, who had disappeared without a trace 16 years ago. Toward evening, the company's head of security walked into his office. May I? Yeah. Got something on the entrance. As much as I could, but not much information. Alcoholic lives with his father. House. Conditions are bad. He's poor. He doesn't work anywhere. She sometimes moonlights as a dishwasher at a diner. The man put a piece of paper with information on it on the table. Yeah, it's got her address and date of birth. Her mother died in a car accident. And there's another interesting fact. Don't go, don't tell. Her father is the same casino debtor you used to steal from. The man's confused. You mean the one who had his house repossessed? Robert looked at the security chief in surprise. The earth is round after all. I thought he'd never remember this loser again. Listen, let's go to Aeroflot and see how he raises his daughter. The uninvited guests found Stephen asleep. The man was wheezing on the stripped sofa. Bottles were lying around. There was a tin can with cigarette butts. Get up, loser. Robert kicked the sleeping, unshaven man in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Stephen couldn't understand anything in his sleep. Who are these people? What do they want? You don't remember me and how in my casino. I'm in debt. Well, if you drink that much, you can forget. What's your daughter's name? The frightened Stephen stared at the man looming over him. Gradually, he began to recognize in him the casino owner who had moved him into this barracks. What do you want? Listen to me. You ain't got nothing to live on. You got a good little girl. How are you going to raise her? Let her work. Let her go. The drunkard Stephen tried it, but was immediately besieged by the guard Robert and fell back on the sofa. Do you want a drink? Asked Robert. Do you have any? Stephen asked hopefully. The guest nodded, and the guard poured vodka into a dirty glass that stood next to the sofa. And now about business. I've been thinking, prices are going up. Credit interest is going up too. If I count your debt now, you'll owe me 3 times as much. I'll have to pay you back. No, I don't have anything. Stephen's scared. What do you mean you don't have anything? And my daughter doesn't earn much washing dishes. Stephen didn't understand what Robert was getting at. It's not enough. I'll pay more. Anyway, I'm buying it from you. The man took out a bundle of bills and began slowly going through them. 1,000 is enough. Stephen was amazed at the money. Or maybe 2. Good, I'm kind today. Here's 10. And the girl works in my house. Yes, and she lives in my house too, in the maid's room. That's how Camille ended up at Robert's house. She was given a uniform of a strict blue dress and a white apron. The housekeeper showed her around the house, explained the girl's duties. Nothing special was required of her to wash, dust, clean, and keep order. The master was almost never at home, and when he came, he did not scold or hurt her, but simply went to his room. Camille felt quite comfortable. Cleanliness was always good, food plentiful. But how could her father do that to her? Sell his own daughter for $100. She's not a commodity or a slave. One day, while Camille was checking the dishes in the kitchen, Robert walked in. Can you make coffee? He asked. He seemed to be in very good spirits, but he was staring at her. Camille turned on the coffee, the machine. Say, what happened to your face? Robert suddenly asked. When I was little, a dog bit me. I was only 5 years old, she replied. intuitively covering the scar with her hand. "Don't be upset, it's fixable. There's medicine now. You can do plastic surgery. I see that you are a real beauty. Your scar is nothing, but it's very expensive. I'll never make that kind of money. You don't have to make it." Camille didn't know what he meant, but in Robert's heart, it's all three. Plowing, her heart was pounding frantically. He handed her a piece of paper. Something was printed on it. Robert had received the paper only today, and his happiness was unbounded. It was a kinship test between them and the girl who reminded him so much of his Nancy, who had disappeared 16 years ago. That day they talked for a long time, sitting in the kitchen until dark. Camille could not believe what was happening. This strong, confident, and self-sufficient man is her father, and she is his own daughter. It was unbelievable and seemed like a dream. He told her everything, how he loved her mother, how she suddenly disappeared when she was pregnant, how he thought she was dead, and she died in the maternity ward. He learned all the information about the baby switch from the midwife. The woman was stubborn for a long time, but was forced to tell everything in the smallest detail. Camille underwent the operation in the capital. She was looking forward to the day when the stitches would be removed. A slight swelling was still visible on her face. "It will go away soon. Don't worry," the doctor said. Her father looked at her, smiling. "You look so much like your mom. A real beauty." 3 years passed. Camille went to university to study at the Faculty of Philosophy. She, like her late mother, also wanted to be a school teacher, and her father didn't stop her. One day, she was driving in the car to her studies. The driver was silent, watching the road intently, and she had nothing to do but listen to music with wireless headphones in her ears. Her dad had given them to her. Suddenly, the girl asked, "Stop, please. What's wrong?" The driver got worried, but he pulled over. Camille got out of the car and walked uncertainly towards the homeless man who was sitting on the embankment. In front of him stood a cardboard box. With difficulty, she recognized in the dirty, unshaven, poorly dressed man Stephen. "Hello," she said, squatting down in front of him. The man looked at her with cloudy eyes. He did not recognize a well-dressed, handsome man and his daughter. After a few minutes, realizing who was standing in front of him, he said, "Is that you?" "Yes, it's me." The man suddenly lowered his head. Tears flowed from his eyes. "I'm sorry. I sold you to that peddler. I acted like a pig. I'm sorry, my daughter. Don't you have any money? I really need a drink." The girl took some large bills out of her purse and put them in a cardboard box. She didn't say anything and silently returned to the car. The car started, and Camille continued to stare at this downcast man, whom she thought was her father, until he disappeared from view.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Nancy left the school. Peter walked beside her, as usual. "But why are you leaving today?" "No, I guess I can't." Clara said she had to weed the potatoes. Nancy sighed. Ever since her father had brought that woman into the house, Nancy's life had been a living hell. Clara had looked for gain everywhere, and of course she had found it. Father worked in town, a week there, a week at home. The week he was home was easier, of course. But when he was away, it started. The first thing, the stepmother decided to expand the vegetable garden and increase the number of livestock in the yard. Dad supported all her ideas, and Clara said, "As soon as the farm starts to bring profit, you can quit this job and work at home." "It would be good, Clara. I miss you and my daughter." The woman was pleased. She smiled. While Daddy was away, all the hard work was on Nancy's shoulders, but she didn't complain. She really wanted Daddy home too. Clara went to the market every 3 days. Nancy didn't know how much money she made there, but it must have been pretty good, because after a year, Daddy quit. The girl thought things would get easier, but it turned out to be much worse. On the first day, when the father was free at dinner, Clara said, "From tomorrow, we start building a new one. I've already ordered the material." "Clara, why is this stable only 5 years old?" "Well, this one's not going anywhere. There'll be an extra one." Father just sighed. Lately, they had only numbers instead of love in their eyes. Then he built a stable and a barn and a chicken coop. But Nancy began to notice that her father smelled more and more of drink. And there was such sadness in his eyes. Clara shouted she could warm him with a broom, but he kept drinking milk. Very soon all the hard work again fell on her shoulders because her father often could not do anything. The village grandmothers sighed. Such a man was ruined by his rubles, not a woman. Clara knew exactly what was being said about her. She argued and fought, almost throwing herself at everyone. Pretty soon people in the village didn't even say hello to her, and she didn't care, to tell the truth. She didn't take anything from anyone. She earned everything herself. All the alkies and idlers, let them bite their elbows in silent envy. Peter, you're not going to win a gold medal anyway. Nancy waved her hand. Why do I need it, this gold medal? To put it in my room and admire it. You wanted to go to college, didn't you? Who's going to let me go to that institute? My father on his hands and knees? Every day on the farm is huge. She sighed. Peter looked at her in amazement. Nancy, what's wrong with you? You're out of your mind. You're the best in the whole school. You wanted to be. How could I? Nancy looked up at the sky. It's okay. I'll get over it. Most people do. They get married, have kids, take care of the household. It's a different time. Peter, leave me alone. It is better to tell your grandfather how normal limping and a little so good. Nancy smiled. A week ago, a terrible event shook the village. It had long been said that the wolves were coming too close to the village, they said. But it's no use. They had a forester. If you could catch him sober once a week. They hoped that nothing terrible would happen. They were wrong. One night the wolves swarmed the neighbor's fence and tried to take the dog off the chain. The owner jumped out. Neighbors. And Peter's grandfather, who is 100 years old. One didn't hesitate. Immediately grabbed the barrel from the wall. Yes, also in the yard to grab who grabbed. But only age gave its own way. The grandfather got confused and swung at the wolf in his leg. It's good that it only hit the soft part. But the rumble scared the wolves too. As they say, it was both a laugh and a sin. The grandfathers treated the whole village. Peter had only his mother and grandfather, so there wasn't much wealth. Everyone carried something tasty or useful to Grandpa Nick, who sacrificed himself for the sake of the rescue. Only one family was left out. And that, of course, was Nancy's family. Clara immediately said, well, if a man is a fool, it's forever. There's nothing to jump around like a young man at that age. Papa was as usual under the influence, and Nancy wouldn't even try. She was never listened to at all. You told your grandfather to correct himself. Listen, Nancy, which field are you going to weed? The farthest one, the one behind the village. So let me come and help you. Don't, Peter. No need. Don't you have your own things to do? Nancy said she realized that Peter would come and help, and they could spend the saved time on the river. And it made her so happy. And it appeared that you were all with Peter and 3 horses. You'll be on the street in no time. If you were a person, you'd be a country bumpkin nobody needs. Wouldn't you look at normal people? Nancy didn't even pay attention. That's how her stepmother always greeted her. Not Peter, not Peter, not Peter, not Peter, not Peter, not Peter. She'd think of something else. No matter how Nancy arrived, she'd be bombarded with accusations from the very doorstep. What she's hiding? Your daddy dragged your drunkard around on his back. Your back is gnawing at you too. Don't even think about it. Don't forget you're on potatoes. I remember about your potatoes. Nancy couldn't hold back any longer. She wanted to shout and stomp her feet, but she realized that the task would then fall on her head even more. Why is she mine? Are you guys eating with your daddy? Or maybe you eat air? Clara put her hands to her sides. Nancy realized that a scandal was about to break out, and it would look like a one-actor play, so it wouldn't come to that. She decided to take no offense and go straight to the field. Quickly, she changed her clothes. As Clara positioned herself and stepped out the door, she was already on her 3rd furrow. When did Peter show up? Not alone, but with his grandfather. Good health and truth. Hello, Grandpa Nick. How's your leg? What's it going to do? She walks more out of habit than anything else. She's long forgotten what pain is. Why is it walking and not like this in this heat? And what's the use of weeding it? We'll be digging soon enough. Nancy sighed. Grandfather grinned into his mustache. He was a wise, kind man. I know, don't say anything. Yours in the store is already scandalized by the wrong color of sugar. She needs yellow, and the store is white. Peter laughed. What's the difference? I thought yellow was bad. Well, I don't know. It is kind of considered to be sweeter. Grandfather sat down on the grass, looked at his grandson. Why don't you get up and go help the girl? Peter stood next to her, and they started pulling the grass with fury. Soon I smelled smoke. Grandpa had built a fire at the edge of the field. Dropped some potatoes from behind his sinuses, took out cucumbers, tomatoes. When there was less than half left, he called them over for a snack. Nancy had never had such a good meal. Obviously, of course, it's just potatoes. But how delicious. In general, in the company of Grandpa Nick and Peter, it was so homely, so nice and quiet. I knew your stepmother when she was a girl. That's why she doesn't like me so much. She's from a good family. Her father's a hard worker. Her mother killed his wife, and she's already driven one man to his grave. But she didn't get anything from the big farm. Her sister came to the funeral, and it turned out that the house and everything that belonged to it belonged to her. Only that Pebbles didn't tell her about it. In general, the stepmother lost everything. Then she stuck to your father. Nancy stretched out thoughtfully. I wonder if Dad knows about it. Is Dad so in love with Clara that he doesn't notice? Yeah, there was a time when they were dating. Didn't anyone say anything to him? I can't help you there. I haven't seen your father in a while. And if I do, he's in no condition to talk. He drinks a lot. This guy was drinking at her place. Nancy at night, when she was already asleep, decided that as soon as she finished school, she'd go somewhere and take her father with her. He'd quit drinking, she'd talk him into it, and they'd get along. They'll be fine. And this one's got to run this place by herself. And winter was a little easier. Didn't have to be in the field, didn't have to be in the bed. Nancy even went for a walk once in a while. Peter, like a faithful guardian, was always there. To be honest, sometimes I'd like to be without him. But somewhere he'd take offense. In general, Nancy had more and more often thought that she should just marry well. Molly is only 2 years older than Nancy, and she got married in the next big village. Her husband, though older, treats her like a porcelain doll. Molly's mother told me that he takes her to school in the city by car and takes her back. Not only does he have a car, but he doesn't let her study. If Nancy could find such a man, she'd marry him right away. Is Peter going to find a new subject in her life? On the other hand, Nancy realized that such luck was not common. Spring had come. Graduation exams loomed ahead. And what? And Nancy didn't know yet. There was no talking to her father about it, but her stepmother, much less what she would tell her. And also, understandably, well, something had to be done. So Nancy made up her mind, choosing a day when the stepmother was in a pretty decent mood. Nancy sat down at the table in front of her. Clara. Yes, she took a break from her calculations and looked at Nancy. That I should talk to you. The stepmother put aside the papers. Her face was serious. Well, let's have a talk. Nancy could see that the stepmother knew exactly what the conversation was about. Graduation is coming up. We have to apply somewhere. The stepmother grinned, not very friendly. We're somewhere else? But to the place where I'm going to study. The stepmother grinned and said, Will your daddy, or will I be someone else's aunt? You realize that my relative is of no use to me. Nancy blushed. Of course, there was logic in her stepmother's words. Her father had long since given her the finger. But what should Nancy do? You realize, Nancy, if you don't help with the chores, I'll have to hire a man. And that's a lot of money. So, no matter how hard I try, I can't give you any money. Anyway, if you're washing your hands of it, there's no reason for you to come here. So if you decide to go to school, I'll sell my family. You can forget it. Nancy almost cried. She'd been expecting something like that. But it was still a shame. But everybody goes to school. You're not everybody. You're in a completely different situation. Am I wrong? That's it. I think I've explained everything clearly to you." The stepmother got up and walked out. Nancy burst into tears. It's exactly as she thought. She's going to rot in this village like this. For a few days, Nancy walked on her own, not her mood. She even decided she wouldn't go to the prom. Peter was so annoying that there was no energy. One day, she came from school, sat on a bench in the yard, and sat in the barn. She heard a rustle. Strange. Stepmother left for the market in the morning. How'd she even get her driver's license? She bought herself a car, an old Jeep. She's been going into town a lot more often. Who's there? The girl carefully stood up, wanted to go to the door, but it opened by itself. Her father's head appeared. He was very drunk, and it was immediately obvious. Nancy sighed bitterly. Nancy doesn't have this one. And then Nancy was so angry that tears sprang from her eyes. What's it to you? Who's here? Who isn't? You can't see anybody anyway. You don't care about anyone but yourself. Dad, why do you hate me so much? Giving me to someone else's aunt. You're the one who's watering your eyes. Nancy, what are you talking about? What's the matter? I don't know what you're talking about. What am I saying? You know that everyone will go to school after high school. Your daughter will continue to clean cow's dung because Grandma doesn't want to do anything. He's more interested in drinking every day than thinking about his daughter. Nancy, wait, and don't cry. But the girl had already run into the house. Kevin sat down on the bench where his daughter had just sat and stared at himself. What a headache from all sorts of thoughts. The man raised his head and saw Grandfather Nick at the gate. Healthy. Grandpa's sick. I don't understand anything. Things are happening at home. Kevin waved his hand. No, she's gone to town. Grandpa Nick went into the yard, sat down next to her. What are you doing, Kevin? Peter says your girl won't let you go to school. Why not? But it's not for 1 year. You have to support her. Don't we have money? Maybe yours does. But I don't think you do. So what's the deal? Kevin lowered his head. He'd been tempted to come out of the barn just now. Nancy had heard her father and Clara talking in the kitchen that evening, talking rather than yelling and arguing. It was very strange because in the last couple years, normally they hadn't communicated at all. The girl tried to listen, but she couldn't make out the words. Half an hour later, Clara stopped by. Nancy, an idea, how about us? The girl came out at the table, sat her father. He was gloomy. Clara pointed to a chair. Sit down. Nancy sat down. She looked at her father in amazement. Apparently, he was sober. Nothing to say. Stepmother. Nancy, your daddy swears he won't take another drop in his mouth. And he says he'll work 3 jobs just to keep you in school. And I can agree to that. But on one condition, if your dad gets drunk once, you drop out of school. Nancy agreed to everything. She realized that the most important thing was to get out of here. Then she'd figure it out. Maybe get a job, maybe something else. Nancy was already dreaming of a very different life. She didn't really know what it was like to live in the city. And to be honest, she didn't know what she'd do there all day long. But she wanted it so badly. A few years went by. Nancy had just gotten her paramedic's diploma and was about to get a job. She had a young man she planned to marry in the future. True, he wasn't a star, but he was a city boy. And he had an apartment, but he lived with his mom. But that didn't frighten Nancy. She was determined to be a good daughter-in-law. She had little contact with her father and stepmother. She went to see them once every 6 months and tried to get away as soon as possible. Nancy, there's an emergency phone call for you. The door of the dorm room opened, and Nancy saw the janitor on the doorstep. It was strange. Usually she was very reluctant to have any of the residents on the phone. Nancy walked out of the room. First she walked, then she ran. The receiver was on the table. Hello. Hello, Nancy. It's Andrew. Yes, Andrew, I'm listening. Here's the thing. Well, Nancy's dead. Yours were going to the city. Something apparently happened to the car. They flew into the ditch. There's a tree there. You need to solve everything here. Nancy dropped the phone, then slowly settled on the floor. How come? How come? Someone handed her some water. Someone helped her into a chair. Nancy sat at the head of the table. Some of the neighbors gathered around the table. What grief is not old? He would have lived and lived. Yes, if he took a man to his senses. Even Garika began to restrain her, they said, and she somehow became calmer when he stopped drinking. A woman needs a real man, not a body. Nancy heard through the fog, but only one thing was going through her head. What to do now? When everyone had gone, Nancy began to wash the dishes. There was a knock at the door. Who was it? It was Peter. Nancy hadn't seen him in a long time. Probably the last time. How did he get into the army? Hello on the walls. Hello, Peter. I don't recognize you. And it was true. Peter had matured from a tall and gangly man to a sturdy tall man. Peter, where are you from? Yes, I came to see my mother. She said you're here to drop by. Peter sat down at the table and looked around the kitchen. Well, it's you. I'm sorry for your loss. Thanks, Peter. She finished cleaning up, looked at him. Would you like a drink? Let's sit and remember Uncle Kolya. And his Clara, too. He was a man after all. Nancy put some sandwiches, a bottle, and a shot glass in front of him. Don't you have one for yourself? I don't drink. You can't drink. They're not strangers to you. Have a little drink and you'll feel better. I'm telling you. Nancy sighed and put down another shot. She tried it with the girls in the dorm, but it hadn't worked. Nancy, it didn't taste good. Nasty. You haven't smelled it. Drink as much as you can in one gulp and don't breathe. Pick a snack or some compote. Nancy did just that. The aftertaste wasn't great, of course, but it wasn't as bad as before. And after a few minutes, she felt her muscles relaxing, getting lighter. So let's do it again. Come on. Nancy woke up with a wild headache. She had absolutely no memory of going to bed last night. I turned my head and was amazed. Peter was sleeping next to me. Shit. What a funeral. She was out of her mind. The most frustrating thing was that she couldn't remember anything. Peter. He moved and turned to her. Nancy, but you're a fire. I tell you, you should drink more often. Peter, get out. Now before the village gets up and you what? I'm an adult. Go away. I'm begging you. Nancy didn't know what to say, so she blurted it out. I have a fiancé. Peter's eyes narrowed. A fiancé, you say? Why'd you jump into bed with me? Yeah, I'm the one who jumped into your bed. All right, I'll be right out. Peter got off in 2 seconds and walked out. Nancy cried. She didn't want to. She didn't want anything. After her childhood friend left, there was a lingering residue on her soul, as if she had wronged someone undeservedly. In the morning, Nancy went to the cemetery, sat on the fresh graves for a while. She cried, and on her way back, she saw Nick's grandfather. He was obviously waiting for her. Hello, Nancy. Hello, Grandpa Nick. I wanted to talk to you, Nancy. The girl blushed thickly. Old man, I haven't slept at all. Not at all. But I haven't slept today either. You know Peter is mine. I saw how he jumped out of your arms. He's going to town today. Mother's crying, and my heart's breaking too. He came here and promised to stay. What happened? Nancy. What could Nancy say to him? She thought that if she told him everything, all her dreams of the city, of city life, would come to an end. She loved the country, of course, but not so much that she couldn't even try to leave. And on the other hand, Peter, he had become such a city girl, her suitor was nowhere near him. Grandpa Nick, nothing happened. It was just sitting around. Nancy walked around the old man and down the path. She could feel his gaze burning her back, but she didn't turn around. 3 days later, she was leaving. She'd seen a glimpse of Peter still here, so she calmed down. Well, good, as much as she doesn't like him. And to connect her life with him she does not want. She knows him. Counting from diapers, what can be interesting in him? She's already packed her things and checked everything. What's off? What's not? Behind the household while the neighbor watches. Nancy promised to give her a young chick for it. The neighbor, the mother of the Molly that Nancy had once envied, sighed. Don't you worry, Nancy. I'll review everything. I'll do everything. Ninka will help. For the tree. Thank you. It's not easy for us right now. Molly is Molly here, Nancy. Where would she be? She was married. You said it was fine. Aunt Kathy waved her hand. What was I supposed to say? that I got married over the summer and there wasn't a day that went by without a beating. But I put up with it as long as I could. Then I had the baby in my arms. We barely fought off the bastard. Nancy was confused. Molly's life had been an example to her for so many years, and now this revelation. The neighbor left. Nancy sat down in the driveway. Nancy, that was Peter's voice. Is something wrong? She ran outside. Peter was almost to the door. Nancy, Grandpa's sick. Help me. It's the paramedic. Our paramedic's on his third day. Nancy rushed into the house, grabbed the first aid kit she always carried in her bag. Didn't even lock the door, so she ran. Peter was running beside her, and he said he'd been pale in the morning, breathing hard. And at lunchtime, he got up from the couch and sat down again. I asked him what, and he just waved me off. He's not feeling well at all now. Nancy, help me. She stopped abruptly, so much so that Peter ran into her, because I'll do what I can, but you have to understand. How old is Nick 94's grandfather? He sighed like he was going to cry. Nancy silently skipped onward. Grandfather was very ill indeed. He was lying on the sofa and breathing with difficulty. Nancy immediately realized that he had a heart attack. She crouched down beside him and rummaged through the medicine cabinet. An hour later, he was feeling much better. Grandpa Nick, do you need to go to the hospital? I'm not going anywhere. That's all I need. I'll die at home. Grandpa said indignantly, What do you mean die? Get those thoughts out of your head. Grandfather grinned, looked at his grandson. Do you think that at 94 life only begins? No, grandson. Everyone has his own destiny. And it's foolish to try to cheat fate. I've had a good life. Guys, everybody who's turning 70 has already cleaned up. Nancy and Peter went outside. Peter, I don't know what to do. To be honest, Grandpa Nick's condition is not good. He's not going to the hospital. I know my grandfather. Nancy looked at Peter, realized that he really cared about his grandfather. But you say the paramedic is drinking, and I have to go. Go. Peter wouldn't look at her. Peter, but I really need to go to my new job. No one's waiting for me. It's not like I'm holding you back, and I understand. Thanks for coming to see you off. Did Nancy shake her head? No, you don't have to. Go on then. There's a bus in an hour. Nancy walked down the street. After a minute, she turned around. But Peter was no longer in the yard. For the first time in her life, she wanted to stay in the village. She walked around the yard, figured out the dog behind his ear, then sat down on the bench. What am I going to do? She sat like that, looking at her watch. The bus had long gone. And what will she go tomorrow? Talk to Andrew, tell him what prospects in the village. And there's no problem with money here. What a farm she has. Nancy didn't know whether she was doing the right thing or not, but she had to decide something. She went to bed with a heavy heart. In the morning, she decided to go. What to do here? When the bus came and she got on, she saw Peter running to his house. Then he immediately closed his eyes again. Grandpa Nick had died. She learned about it from Sveta the girl, from their village I met by chance in town. Nancy tried not to blame herself. She understood perfectly well that Nick's grandfather would never get out. But she realized what Peter thought of her. A week later, she went to Andrew. Strange that he hadn't shown up in the meantime. His mom opened the door. Nancy hadn't seen her yet. And to be honest, she kind of scared her right off. Hello, Andrew's home. Who are you? Not Nancy. Nancy. The girl tried to smile. You shouldn't come here anymore, Nancy. Andrew met a nice city girl. Well-mannered. She was taken aback. What do you mean, met? He knew I was going to the funeral. But he knew what? Tell me what you can give to your family. You don't have a job yet. No parents to help now. Nancy even began to gasp for air at such accusations, then spoke out. Well, yes, I guess it's nothing you dream of, is it? But only if the house I've got is worth more than your apartment or the farm, for which I got a very large sum. But you don't care about that now, do you? Goodbye. She ran downstairs. Tears rolled from her eyes. The steps merged into one. That same day, Nancy threw all her things into a suitcase and left for the village. Yes, fuck it all. People live in the village, especially with her profession. In the evening, someone knocked quietly on the door. Yes, there was Andrew. "Hello, Nancy." She threw herself on the back of a chair and looked at him with interest. God, what did she see in him? He was a skinny, long guy with glasses. Pale hands, pale forehead, sweating all the time. She's like her mom said, "You're letting out a rich bride." "Why would you do that?" "I just missed you." "I missed you." "That's good." "I said some things to your mom in there." "It's okay. My mom's not a very good character. You'll have to forgive her for not talking to her so nicely the whole time they knew each other." Nancy suddenly burst into tears. It's a shame. Is she so ugly that you can love her for her inheritance? "Andrew, you see, what's the matter?" Nancy looked at Andrew, who was sitting on her bed, and grinned. "You're a very good man. Do I need you that much? I inherited a lot of debt." Andrew from the villages. "What debts?" Nancy's getting a little carried away. "What kind of debts?" "Strange. That's strange." "Andrew, it's nothing. I just remembered I have to go somewhere urgently. I'll meet you tomorrow." He quickly sneezed on those slits and vanished. There's no other name for it because Andrew never stonked. In fact, he looked more like a ghost. Nancy threw herself on the bed and burst into tears at what was wrong with her. What? She'd gotten a pretty good education, so she fell asleep and thought. In the morning, I packed all my things. She got on the bus. She went out and looked around. But isn't it beautiful? At the edge of the village, construction was boiling. She heard they were building a new club. It will be called the House of Culture. You can live anywhere, and the saying, "Where you're born, there you are." You shouldn't forget it at all. She entered her yard and left the yard with new eyes. That's good. There's the house. I haven't seen Peter Nancy. She'd walked by their house a few times on purpose, but he either didn't see it or didn't want to come out. Probably the latter. It's all right. He'll get over it. He'll understand, and they'll make up. Nancy realized more and more every day that she wanted to be with him, wanted to live together, to have children together. 2 weeks passed. During that time, Nancy sold most of the farm, keeping some for herself, of course. She also became very good friends with Molly. They hadn't talked much before because Molly was older. Nancy didn't recognize her at first. Skinny, kind of brooding, but then she got over it. They got to talking. One night when they were having tea, Molly asked Nancy, "What do you think of the job?" "I don't know. I'll have to go to the headmaster, see what he suggests, or the nurse's station." "There's a paramedic." Molly laughed too. "What kind of paramedic is he?" "Well, you know, it's embarrassing to put a man down like that. Stop thinking about people. They're alcoholics about it." All night Nancy thought about it. It's true, nobody thinks about her. Why should she? Especially since Molly's right not to. In the morning, she picked up her papers and headed for the office. Andrew used to be called chairman, but now he's a director. What difference does it make, really? He was the one who dealt with all matters in the village. "Oh, Nancy, they told me you were back, and I thought it was for good. Or is it business?" "Business, Andrew. It's about the principal's job. Rubbing my hands together. So you're back for good, not running away." "Yeah, it's not in the plans yet." He looked at her real hard. "See, I'm gonna hire you now. You later. Come on, Andrew. I'm not 18, I said I'll be here." After an hour of negotiation, when the acting paramedic was called in and sprayed around with fumes of booze, he thanked her profusely for getting rid of such a responsibility. Nancy received the keys to the nurse's station in her hands. She stared at them in amazement, but she was a real person now. Straight from the office, she went to the nurse's station. The grass is higher than the fence. The path is narrow to the door. Yeah, the old paramedic didn't bother much. Nancy's had enough and rolled up his sleeves. Now she can do what she really needs to do. No one showed up at the nurse's station. At least 2 weeks. Dust lay everywhere. The few instruments that had been messed with piled on a table. An hour or two later, the door opened and Nancy heard Molly's voice. "Nancy, are you here?" Nancy looked out here. "Where else would I be?" Molly laughed. "Oh, I can't. Have you seen yourself?" Nancy wiped the streaks on her cheek, fixed her hair, which immediately jumped back into free flight. "Come on, neighbor, help me out instead of laughing. It's a two-handed job. The work went faster. By evening, the insides of the medical center were shining and glistening. They walked out. Nancy sighed tiredly. I'll have to put all this beauty out tomorrow myself. Listen, ask your mother if you can plant any more flowers now. I will. We'll have to ask the men to mow. I don't want to ask anyone myself. In the morning, Nancy got up early, gave her a cow, put her out in the herd. She was immediately surrounded by the village women. Nancy, is it true you are a paramedic now? She smiled, isn't it true? And that every day you will work and even come like that. Today she put on more orders. And from tomorrow, you're welcome. Just think, just a little while ago you were a girl running around, and now you're a doctor. It's crazy. Nancy, it was nice to hear all that. She was starting to feel proud of herself. I mean, what did she need in that town? She's got everything. A big house, good money, a job. And if she works hard, she'll get a lot of respect. And then maybe Peter will hear about what she's like. And he'll come to her. Nancy realized that they were adults, that they could talk. But she knew Peter well. He wouldn't be the first to talk. On the first day that the nurse's station was to be open, Nancy, before she reached it, saw a crowd of old ladies outside. She realized perfectly well that today she would have an exam. There was no other way to call it. And of course, everyone got sick all at once. Molly, who was walking next to her, she was taking her daughter to kindergarten when she whistled. Well, friend, you can't get it all sorted out by tomorrow. Nancy smiled. It's okay, I can handle it. By lunchtime, the line had visibly settled down. Nancy could feel her stomach rumbling. Her patient heard it. When did the appointment end? She came out and said, Taxi. Our doctor's tummy's already rumbling. Give me some tea at least, girls. Everyone agreed without complaint, for which Nancy was very grateful to him. Half an hour later, she looked out into the corridor a little more rested and cheerful. Who was next for health? By evening, all the old ladies went home satisfied. The director dropped by and asked if he needed anything. Nancy, with a nice smile, handed him the list and added that it was very urgent. The principal looked perplexed at the double sheet, which had been and written off on all sides. What is all this stuff anyway? Yup, everything, nothing could be left out. He scratched the back of his head. Didn't I overreact by putting you in Peter's place? Nancy remained silent. Andrew sighed and walked out. She never saw Peter again. Then Molly told her he was working on some city job, felling timber into plots. He only comes home on Saturday to pray, sleep, and then go back to the woods. But not the same ones at his house. It's been 2 months since Nancy started work. The grandmothers were happy. That's the main thing. At that age, they don't want medicine so much as attention. Of course, there have been younger people who've come in. Nancy had 2 of them rushed to the hospital. One man with appendicitis, the other with kidney pain. I mean, Nancy couldn't be 100% sure without tests. But it looked a lot like stones. As it turns out, she wasn't wrong. The hospital said a couple more days, and there'd be no one left to treat. It was the end of a normal workday. The weather was bad outside, so there weren't many patients today. Nancy was just about to close the medicine safe when the door slammed. And someone yelled, "Doctor is doctor." Nancy jumped out of the office. Peter, Nancy almost fainted. Peter was in such a state. Daughter here. One of the men looked at her fearfully. Here on the couch. Peter was put on the couch. Somebody get Frank. If he's sober, get him over here. The younger one nodded and ran out of the infirmary. Nancy, on the other hand, examined Peter several times on the head. Looks like the bones are intact. The wounds are superficial. His arm is hanging by a whip from his shoulder. Look, we need to avoid the city. If possible, the forest is the only place where our men can make money. If this gets out, we'll lose all our jobs. Are you crazy? A man can die. I understand. I'm saying if it's possible. Lucky for Nancy, Frank was sober. He walked briskly into the office. He glanced at Peter. What do we do? Let's take it one step at a time. Let's start with the head. An hour later, Nancy put in the last stitch. Frank smiled approvingly. Good job. Peter opened his eyes. Nancy, lying quietly still. He smiled again and closed his eyes. The arm turned out to be dislocated. Frank helped. Peter screamed and finally passed out. Nothing, just a little soreness, that's all. Peter's mother literally flew into the nurse's station. She threw herself at the man who asked not to send Peter to town, that he was satisfied. Sitting there, "You'd better fall through the ground, Gad." The man turned away from her clapping and said nothing. As Frank explained, he was the cheerleader. "Calm down, Vanessa. Like you don't know your son. He's the first to go everywhere." A woman looked in on her. "Nancy, don't worry. Everything will be fine. I'll be here with him till morning. I'll stay with you too. You don't have to. I'll be fine." Peter woke up in the middle of the night, looked around the nurse's station with a hazy gaze, stopped it on Nancy and Nancy sleeping at the table. Dropped off. "Peter, how are you feeling?" "Who knows? Not so good. You're very lucky. You only took the glancing blow to the head." "Yeah, lucky. So lucky." Peter was transported home in the morning. Vanessa, his mother, thanked Nancy for a long time. Then she said, "Nancy, you're coming." "Well, of course, I'll come back every day to change the bandages. Treat them. Then the live ones have to come off." Nancy ran to Peter's house every day. Except the easier Peter got on him, the gloomier he looked. One day he said to Nancy, "You can go no more, Peter, you don't have to." She realized he wasn't talking at all about her looking after him as a doctor, but specifically about their relationship. Tears came to her eyes. "You're sure? I'm sure of it. You said yourself you wanted to marry a city man, so I'll stay out of the way." Nancy wanted to say something, but Peter beat her to it. "Anyway, I'm getting married soon. I got a fiancé." Nancy ran out of the house like a scalded man. All the way home, she ran and cried. She calmed down a little at home. It's just Peter freaking out. Anyone would freak out if they were him. Well, he'll calm down a little, and then they'll talk. Time passed. Peter didn't make any moves. Then she found out he'd gone into the woods again. Nancy was furious. "Oh yeah, to hell with you. William's been after her for a long time. The boy from the neighboring village. She'll get Peter." A day later, William showed up with a chocolate bar. He sat in silence. Then he said tomorrow's a day off to the club. "Some artists are coming. Why don't we go?" He said he was hopelessly sure he'd be turned down. "Shall we go?" William jumped, didn't he? "I'll pick you up at 6 o'clock tomorrow." "All right then." Nancy felt absolutely nothing for William, not disgust, not sympathy. It was just the man and the man and the man. All that was on her mind was Peter. Had he really told her the truth? No way. He was just trying to annoy her. Nancy was sure of it. It was all right, Peter. She could be angry too. Of course, she knew perfectly well that it was all a kindergarten, but she couldn't help it. It wasn't nice to William. She didn't promise anything like that, though. He didn't say anything like that. He invited her to a club. She said yes. William knocked on the door. Minute to minute. Nancy wasn't quite ready yet. "Yeah, come in." He went in, took a look around. It's quite a place. Even bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. Nancy laughed. That doesn't make sense. A house can't be bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. William smiled too and touched the big TV. "Do you have a household too?" "I do." "What's a village without a farm?" "A big one." "No, a couple of piglets, a cow, and some small things." The man looked at her with admiration. "How do you manage?" Nancy laughed. "What's a farm?" Tears. "We used to have a farm. You could drag your feet. You probably know that yourself." "Know how?" "Are you sure? You're not from our village." William sighed. "I am. My mom managed to give birth to me. 4 houses left. No road. So we'd sell the house and move somewhere closer." The man laughed. "Who needs it in that remote area? It's almost 7 kilometers to work." Nancy sat down in front of him. "But we have to do something. Go to Grigory Andreevich." William waved his hand. "Went more than once. Do you know what he says to me? He says that in my family there is only one worker. It's not profitable to give a house. It's better to give a house to a family with several workers and children." Nancy shook her head. On the one hand, the director could be understood, but on the other hand, what should people do? Half an hour later, they walked towards the club. The crowd was apparently invisible. People from all the neighboring villages came to see the town's artists. She saw Peter. Her heart clenched, and Peter noticed her and immediately disappeared. Nancy turned her head for a long time, but she never saw where he had gone. It wasn't until they were already telling stories she noticed him. Peter came into the hall, holding some girl under his arm. Nancy was so cold. Wasn't he lying? He really does have a fiancée. The mood was ruined. She didn't see who was performing there, what was being sung. She just sat there staring in front of her. She clapped when other people clapped. After the concert, there was dancing. She saw Peter dancing with the same girl. There was only one thought in her head. She had to talk to him. Tell him they are both wrong. Peter pressed the girl very tightly against him, and she cried out. And then Nancy laughed, even felt sick. She grabbed William by the arm and dragged him to the dance floor. I can't dance. Nancy will learn. She clung to him and gradually moved closer to where Peter was dancing. He noticed her for a long look and then pressed his lips to that girl's lips. Nancy had nothing to do, and she immediately kissed William. The guy's eyes popped out of his forehead in surprise, and Peter was gone. How long did Nancy keep looking for him? But she never saw him again. William, I'm going home to the wall. How I think we are. That we have neither we nor we. I'm tired and sleepy. Can I at least walk you home? No, you can't. I just want to be alone. I see. Nancy realized she was being undeservedly rude to the guy, but she couldn't help it. She walked down the street. It was quiet, nice. Occasionally someone's dog would start barking, but they quickly calmed down. Nancy went to her wicket, sighed, pushed it open, and fell into someone's strong arms. What a bird. Peter, did you scare me? It's gonna happen. Peter smelled strongly of booze. Are you drunk? Go home. No way. How am I supposed to go home when you've been tailing me all night on purpose? Peter, what's wrong with you? He held her and wouldn't let go. Then he looked at her. I missed Peter. Nancy got scared. Peter, please go home. He picked her up in his arms and carried her towards Sarajevo. Peter, please don't, please, you don't have to be so loud that a respected paramedic is caught doing something indecent. You and I are about to engage in some very indecent activities. Peter. She resisted as long as she could. But Peter wasn't rude, he was just persistent. Toward morning, Peter silently got up and slipped out of the barn, but never said a word to her. Nancy had so hoped that now they would all finally talk and work things out. She could see that he cared for her. He's just made up his mind about some nonsense for some reason. But it's all right, she'll go and talk to him. And all day Nancy lay on the sofa. Decided to give herself a real day off. She slept in. Got up in the evening, made a salad, and collapsed in front of the TV again. The next day, almost as soon as Nancy got to work, William showed up, holding a bouquet of asters that grew in every yard, a solemn expression on his face. Nancy, how have I missed you? Nancy cocked an eyebrow in surprise. Then she remembered how she behaved with William, and blushed. It wasn't really his fault. She and Peter had brought him into the game. William's not very nice, but no. But my mom's expecting us for dinner tonight. The principal has authorized the car to be taken after work. Nancy had just gathered the strength to reply as the door swung open. Standing on the doorstep was Molly. Nancy, their Aunt Vanessa bad. Petkin and Mama went quickly. Nancy grabbed her suitcase, threw it to William. You'll see for yourself later. They almost ran the distance to Peter's house. Molly told stories along the way. Peter was leaving in the morning, she and her mother. They had a long argument at the gate. And then Peter ducked into the car and drove off. Where did Nancy go? Where? Where to work? I don't know where, but apparently for a long time, because she had her suitcase with her. Aunt Vanessa sat on the bench with her head bowed. Mom says she thought she was crying. But she just sat there and sat there. So she ran to her, and her eyes were closed and her lips were white. Nancy Chegal was almost on autopilot. How could it be? How could he just pick up and leave? What about her? She refused to believe that Peter had run away again. Well, it can't go on like this forever. Aunt Vanessa really wasn't well. She tried to say something, but Nancy could already see that one side of her face was twisted. She gave her a shot, then another. Molly, run to me, call an ambulance. Say stroke. Tell them I asked them to call. There's a number taped to the phone. And Molly looked frightened at Aunt Natasha and rushed to the station. There at the gate stood a confused William. What's there, Nancy soon? What Nancy? A man is dying there. Molly waved her hand and rushed into the room. By the time the woman was taken away, there was a crowd outside her house. Molly, look after mine today. I'll go with her. Sure, Nancy, no problem. But what about you? Figure it out. Andrew's here. Go, Nancy. How's the freebie? Call me at home. I'll send a car to pick you up. Thanks a lot, Andrew. Nancy stayed in town till morning. Toward morning, the woman started to feel a little better. But you're a medical professional. You must realize it's too early to make any predictions. Let's hope the woman is a country woman, a sturdy one. Nancy looked at her watch. She was catching the first bus to the village. That would do it. At the same time on bus 1 and 3 will come again. The first person Nancy saw as she stepped down from the foot of the bus was. It was Andrew. The last person Nancy expected to see here at all. Nancy, I've been waiting for you for a hell of a long time. Andrew, what are you doing here anyway? But you're missing. So I figured. Wait, you're supposed to be marrying a city girl who's no match for me. He wrinkled his nose crankily. Stop it. It doesn't suit you. The marriage didn't work out because, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's like you're not happy to see me. What should Andrew squint at? How fast have you changed? Andrew, what does it matter if I've changed or not? You have no business being here. She wanted to walk past, but Andrew walked beside her. Nancy, I get it. You're hurt. You're angry. All right, I agree with you. But I think we know each other well enough to overlook little things like arguments. Andrew, you really don't get it, do you? Nancy stopped. You can go back to your town in peace. Nancy, what? I think we'll at least talk. Are you giving me tea? No, I'm not giving you tea. Nancy, I'm having difficulties. And I don't need support both mentally and financially. Nancy squinted angrily. It's what they would go for you, Andrew, along with your mommy. Andrew stopped smiling too. He was just about to say something when a car stopped nearby. Nancy, trouble. She turned around. William got out of the car. William, it's just hooked up and it won't go away. William quickly stepped between her and Andrew. Young man, you don't understand. You were told to go where you were going. Andrew spat. You'll regret it. Looking for shelter. Andrew turned around and walked away. And Nancy even gasped with indignation. William turned to her. You're not a cow. You're very beautiful, Nancy. When we go to meet my mom. Jesus, William, you too. Nancy turned and rushed toward the house. William gave her a long look. 3 days later, Nancy went to the hospital again. Aunt Kathy brought some honey and a piece of homemade cheese. Say hello to Vanessa. Let her get well. Don't spoil herself. Okay, Aunt Kathy, I will. Nancy pushed open the door to the room and froze at her mother's bedside as Peter sat gently spoon-feeding her. Hello. He glanced at her briefly, nodded, and continued to feed the woman. Nancy walked over and laid out on the table everything she had brought. So how are you guys doing here? Aunt Vanessa smiled. It didn't come out very well, though you could tell she was smiling. Kathy sent you a reply and said she was correcting you. More like a nod. Peter left the room. Nancy sat for a while and then scrambled out as well. She saw him at once, came over. Thank you, Nancy, for Mom saved Grandpa wouldn't, but Mom did. Peter, Grandpa couldn't have been saved. Believe me, you didn't try, you just left. See how you don't understand. How can I explain it to you? Even if they had taken him to the hospital, he still wouldn't have recovered. And I don't want to hear anything. Peter, Nancy, and I took 2 days off. I'm leaving again tomorrow, and I won't be back for a long time. Peter, what's it got to do with me? But I love you. Peter grinned wickedly. Well, you'll love someone else. It's the truth. Peter is family. And I'm leaving tomorrow, and I don't care what you're telling me right now. I don't believe you, and I honestly don't want to. Peter got up and went to the hospital. Peter, stop. He didn't turn around. She drove home, and not a single tear came out of her eyes. She got off the bus, walked to the house, and there was someone sitting on the bench at the gate. Nancy sighed. It was William, and apparently his mom. Well, apparently it was her fate that Nancy put a smile on her lips. Nancy William rushed towards her. Nancy, you forgive us, but you never have time. Nancy held out her hand in response. Nancy, come on in. As they walked through the yard. When they entered the house, Camille gasped. How big was this place in the city? Not everyone has one. Nancy turned with a smile, so there's not much room to swing in the city. They're small apartments. You're right. Nancy, what is there in the city if you can live as a human being in the countryside? Nancy threw off her jacket and began to set the table. She was in the mood to rip it off and throw it away. And then she remembered that one of the patients had brought her a beautiful bottle, saying that relatives had brought it from the south. She remembered how relaxing it was and quickly found it. Put it in the middle of the open table, looked at them, who were all looking at the house. Let's get to the table. Hungry everyone. The woman looked around. Oh, so many things to eat. Don't be shy. What's this? This is cognac from the south. I've never tasted cognac. For almost an hour, they talked about nothing, about the weather, about nature, about potatoes not being born. Then Camille, when apparently the cognac had done its work, spoke on the right subject. You on the walls, you realize that you are no longer young for the village and generally considered an old diva. As it happens, her William mine was almost 30 years old. Camille banged her fist on the table. William jumped up. Mom kept her voice down. Nancy watched the woman with interest. William just didn't know where to put himself. And Camille continued, you should be alone. Especially since my William has fallen head over heels in love with you. And you're a girl with blood and milk, with a respectable job, a house and a farm. There's a lot of independent women like you nowadays. Anyway, you should get married. She said it like she was making a point. William sat there red as a crab. She poured the walls for everyone and said, well, if we must, we'll get married. Camille took a swig and immediately wanted one. She and William carried her over to the couch. Vali kept apologizing. Nancy, I'm sorry. Mommy doesn't drink at all, just pour. Just a teaspoon before bedtime. I don't know what came over her. It's okay. Let her rest. You can't drive. You can't make her drive so many kilometers at night. I wasn't thinking. Varia gave her a confused look. Nancy, what did you say about getting married? That's what I said. You want to marry me, don't you? Very much. Tell me honestly, is it for the house or not? No, Nancy. It's Mom who's always looking for an advantage. That's all. So she's starting to get ready for the wedding. Nancy S. threw the dishes in the sink. I stood there, thought about it, and decided it would help in the morning. What are you standing there for? Let's go where? What do you mean? Where to sleep? Just like that. Well, you can wait till the wedding if you want. She went to her room and William, as if he'd realized it, ran after her. In fact, Nancy realized that she was doing it because of the resentment she felt toward Peter. But she said to herself, it's all right, it's all right. Or so Peter told me quickly. Soon William showed up. Of course, even with his eyes closed, it was clear that it wasn't Peter. Vali turned away and drank, and she lay staring at the ceiling. The tears quietly flowed and flowed. In the morning, Nancy got up before everyone else. She quietly changed her mind. Dishes ready, put them away when she got dressed. Camille woke up as well. Oh, Nancy, how come I slept through everything? Where are you going? To work for breakfast. How are you getting home? Well, drop my keys off at the nurse's station. Well, whether it was on purpose or just a coincidence. But Camille showed up at the nurse's station just as it was getting crowded. Camille was sick. One of the old ladies came up to meet her, but you'd say she was sick. She brought the house keys to her future daughter-in-law. What daughter-in-law? Well, to which Nancy knows. You're lying, so our Nancy can marry your William. Why should I lie? You don't believe me? And the keys to his secret Camille went to the door of the study. Opened it on the wall, took the keys. I checked everything, turned everything off. Okay, Camille, thank you. The old woman closed the door and looked at everyone in the room. What's eaten and what's interesting about it? My William is so bad, he's not fit to be Nancy's husband. The same old woman laughed. No, why not bad? Not bad only or not very bad. But neither is your whole family. And Camille Evil flashed his eyes and headed for the exit at the door and stopped. He who laughs last laughs well and left. The old ladies whispered for a long time. One of them summed it up. Well, if you are 28 to 29 years old, you will marry a goat. The old ladies nodded, but still some feeling that everything was wrong did not leave them. Almost a month passed. William visited her often, but not as often as her future mother-in-law. You could say she moved in with Nancy completely. Sometimes she could cook dinner, but more often she just relaxed and almost never did the dishes. Nancy didn't pay any attention to that. She paid no attention to anything at all, because she had other things on her mind right now, not happy thoughts at all. The fact was that Nancy was pregnant. She herself had only found this out a few days ago after doing some calculations. Nancy realized that the father was definitely not William. She breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, she didn't want children with William just yet. But she immediately grabbed her head. What was she going to do now? The wedding was in 2 weeks, a wedding to William. A baby inside her with Peter. Nancy didn't know what to do. Didn't really want to be a single mother. Sure, it wasn't exactly ancient times now, but the baby would still have a hard time. If she canceled the wedding in the hope that Peter would come and recognize her child later, she could be embarrassed. Nancy lay awake for several nights and then decided to tell William everything. She couldn't lie to him like that. He's not lazy, but he's still human. We didn't get to talk until just before the wedding. Camille kept close to them, living according to the principle that where they were, there she was. And I was always trying to teach them something. William doesn't need to talk to you. Let's talk. He came home from work and lay in front of the TV. A very serious conversation. William turned off the TV, sat on the couch. Is something wrong? Yes, Nancy sighed. You see, before you, I dated a guy. So we broke up. Then you got married, things got crazy. A few days ago, William got tense. What? That he's back? No, it's worse. I don't see how it could be worse. Worse for you. Anyway, William, I'm pregnant. Not with you. But I'm not terminating the pregnancy. Nancy blurted it all out in one breath and winced at how relieved she felt. William was silent. She opened her eyes. He sat silent, arms lowered listlessly. What's it like now? I don't know, William. I've told you everything. It's up to you. She left the room and then heard the front door slam. Apparently, William had left. Nancy sighed. Well, if he decided to call off the wedding, so be it. Only something told her he wouldn't cancel anything. William came the next day. Nancy, my mom, and I talked it over. Consulted who? Nancy thought she was going to faint at that confession. Mom, of course. You didn't want to lie to her, did you? No, but I thought it was our business for now. No, it's not. I mean, she'll think it's you. But well, that it'll be her own grandchild. Nancy sighed. Maybe he was right, but it was kind of gross, like getting dirty. So what did you and Mom decide? We decided you gave us no choice. Did that sound like that again? Not really. But Nancy just didn't know what to say. Nancy, let's just not talk about it. That's all. We don't know what's ahead of us. William, what do you mean? No, it's just that life is very unpredictable. It seemed like everything had been decided, but Nancy didn't feel very good about the conversation. They decided not to have a big wedding. Camille supported them in what? And rightly so, there's no money to waste. Better to buy something. Nancy grinned. Money, considering that it was mostly Nancy who was spending money on the wedding, was funny to hear. Of course, this was not at all how Nancy had envisioned the day from the wedding. It left the impression that they were just paying tribute to tradition. Nancy went back to work and William took a vacation. He said that first of all, he was tired, and secondly, they were obliged to give time off after the wedding. Nancy was already realizing that she was not going to break her leg very much. When the pregnancy was 3 months old, Nancy began to agonize. Yes, so much that just her soul was turned inside out. Whatever she did, whatever she took, she was throwing up all the time. She had already pulled out all her textbooks, but she couldn't find anything. She knew it was common, something she didn't like. Please, I'm going into town tomorrow for 2 days. He's away from the TV. Why do you need all these tests? To get registered. Okay, sure. He went back to watching TV. Nancy sighed that she was alone before she got married and after. That you can't get yourself registered. Nancy laughed. Come on, Camille. You can't do that. You could even be punished for it. It used to be so much easier. You got pregnant, had a baby, and that was it. And now a bunch of tests for all sorts of nonsense only harm the baby. Nancy went back to her room with a smile. It was nice that at least someone cared about the baby. Of course, you can't make Valia love someone else's child. But at least sometimes you can ask about her well-being. In 2 days, the nausea was almost completely gone. Nancy didn't understand anything. The doctor spread his hands. Look for a problem at home. Maybe food. Maybe country milk. You see, we can try to find the cause of what's making you so nauseous. But we'll only know that when you've had the baby. Nancy, and I knew it all too well myself, but try to ride to the city all the time is not good either. I just decided to be patient. That time would pass, and the nausea would pass. But I still decided to diet. Not to eat anything at all. What could it be? She came home. Her mother-in-law asked her what her tests were, what was normal, what wasn't normal. Only then did she let her rest. Nancy first wanted to go to her room, but then she decided to lie down on the veranda. It's a little cooler there, plus the air is fresh. She was already starting to fall asleep. She heard William and his mother come into the kitchen. The mother was reading to William. Nancy was about to pull the pillow over her ears when she realized the conversation was about her. William, you didn't bring any wheat again. Mom didn't have time. Well, really, there's a whole wagon load of work to do. But get to work. Of course, it's more important. Did you hear that creep is back? What geezer? What Peter? The one your Nancy was having an affair with. William was quiet for a while. How do you know who she was having an affair with? You're the only one who doesn't know. Everyone else knows. So she came back. So what? Nancy's married now. Oh, but God gave her a fool of a son. You want me to tell you what could happen? Well, tell me this. Nancy could physically feel her breathing getting heavier. Peter's back. It was a nightmare, but she barely breathed. And she knew there was a reason her mother had brought William into the kitchen. Her room was very far away, which meant that what they were talking about was not for Nancy to know. And then there was the grass. What kind of weed? Nancy, maybe with honesty. She told you she wasn't pregnant by you. Any other woman would have just kept her mouth shut, and you'd be raising someone else's child. But she's going to tell you because he's about to have a kid. Who knows how he'll behave, but it's obviously not going to do us any good. Option 1, he'll tell Nancy that since they share a child, they should be together. The second one is he'll tell her to fuck off. Then when the baby's born, he'll start making demands. Yeah, money grubbing. See, for some reason, Mom thought she'd tell him something. And then for some reason she thought it was going to be that bad. Because, son, I've lived. I also really don't want to go back to our house. Back to your meager paycheck and the basins in the rain. I don't know where you're going with this. Am I supposed to walk next to Nancy so she doesn't, God forbid, talk to him? You don't have to walk next to her. Just get your ass up and go get some weed. If you give her a little more, she won't just be nauseous anymore. Everything should be fine. Then if we don't abort, we'll be rid of this baby in a couple or 3 weeks. And no one and nothing, son, will stop us from enjoying life. Nancy procured the edge of a pillow to keep from screaming at what she had just heard. Her mother-in-law is poisoning her baby. What should she do now? Run to the neighborhood police officer? And how will Nancy prove all this? She's got no one to stand up for her. Something told Nancy that if she went out there and told them to get lost, no one would leave. What would happen to her was not so clear. She heard a truck pull away from the house. That means William went to get weed. She's got to get to the people, and then we'll see what happens. She slipped quietly out of the porch and walked briskly toward Peter's house. She didn't understand why, though of course she realized that if anyone could protect her, it was him. But everything would have to be told. Everything absolutely. She yanked open the wicket, peeked out. No one seemed to notice her. Took a breath. Who are we hiding from? Nancy shuddered. It was a voice she would have recognized from 1,000. Peter, hello. I need to talk to you. My husband doesn't scold. And Nancy couldn't hold back any longer. At first she just cried. And then she got really hysterical. Peter was looking at her terrified. Nancy, do you have him? That he's hitting you. I'm gonna beat the hell out of him. No, he doesn't. Then what? Let's go in the house. He took Nancy under his arm and quickly led her home. Aunt Vanessa gasped, Nancy, baby, what's the matter with you? Hold on, I'll get you some water. While Nancy sang loudly, banging her teeth against the edge, Peter and his mother and watched her intently. Nancy set the glass down, calmed down a little, sighed. There's something I need to tell you. Peter sat down on the chair in front of her. Go on then. I don't think the story will be too interesting. But go ahead. Nancy missed the moment when Peter put his mask back on. I don't care. Let him act however he wants to act. It'll only help. She sighed again. I'm pregnant. Peter smirked. That's very valuable information. Nancy sighed again. Not from my husband. It's from you, isn't it? He stood up, then sat down. Nancy, why would you do that? If you weren't married. But why would you lie now? And I'm not lying. But I didn't come here to tell you about the pregnancy. Right before the wedding, I told William that I was expecting a baby and that it wasn't his. He and my mom were deciding what to do, but they decided to let it be. I calmed down, relaxed, and decided that never in your life will you ever know you're having a baby. Peter clenched his fists but remained silent. Aunt Vanessa moved closer to her and stroked her arm. Don't worry. Tell me. Nancy somehow felt calmer, and she went on talking. After Nancy had finished her story, Vanessa said that her grandmother in Nice was a pain in the ass. Apparently, he only got it from her. After all, they want to destroy a living soul. Peter didn't get up from his mom. Not just a living soul. They want to ruin my child. Nancy raised his head. Peter, I don't want anything from you. I won't ask you for anything. Just help. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just afraid to go home. But we'll talk about what happens next later. Right now, we have other things to think about. This is a very delicate situation. As you can imagine, it's no big deal. Especially since the tests didn't show anything. There's no way to prove it. What's most important now? Vanessa's up. The most important thing is not to jeopardize the lives of the baby and Nancy. We need to save all these proceedings for later. That's also true. But we can't let them go unpunished either. You realize what they're doing is a real crime. I do realize that, but I'm not letting Nancy go in there. Mom, wait. Would you call James? Vanessa blushed. James had only recently come to their village. He had been in the militia, and when he retired, he had bought a house and left the city apartment to his son, who, by the way, also continued his work. Vanessa and James began a friendship and then a romance. They kept it a secret. James didn't understand why, though. Why do I have to go call him? Go get him. He's your neighbor, too. Mom, please go. He'll understand you quicker. Vanessa, I wanted to say something else, but I changed my mind and ran out the door. Peter moved closer to Nancy, took her lessons in his. Nancy, you hear me? Don't be afraid. Nobody's gonna hurt your baby. Nancy, even though I was very upset, I noted that Peter said yours, not ours. So be it. She doesn't care. The important thing is that no one threatens her baby. Nancy was sure she was going to have a daughter. 15 minutes later, Vanessa returned. She was accompanied by a distinguished-looking man. The girl had to tell the story again. There you go. I thought this couldn't happen in the village, so it's for the house, for the money. That's what they can do. The way I see it, It's not really about the baby. It's the house that's at stake. These guys are all over it. Is that what it is? Grass, you say. It's really not that hard to find out what she's getting. It's just that you need credentials. You sit here, I'll go get my son. Peter's up too. But how? We don't know anything from what Nancy says. James smiled. A good bloodhound. Everything will find weed, and it will leave its mark either in the car or at home or in that old house. He turned to Nancy. You better lie down, run, or better yet, sleep. All this won't be soon. And you need to rest. And don't go outside, all of you. God forbid they suspect anything and that's it. We'll never find anything. Nancy lay down on Peter's bed with pleasure. Everything here in the room smelled, and they were so pleasantly exciting. Peter peeked in on her a couple times, but Nancy was sweetly asleep. It was as if she had stopped worrying. Realized that she was treated very differently in this house. It was voices that woke her up, and then a light flashed in the room. Peter stood on the threshold and smiled. Well, you get up to bed. You need to testify. They've already taken your relatives. Nancy sat up abruptly. How? Just like that. William came home. Mother's waiting. She says you're missing. So they went looking for you. They've got the whole place surrounded. They forgot all about what they left in the car. James says that wood only looks safe, but in the right hands it could be poison. Nancy, just bear with me. Answer all the questions. Okay, Peter. Is there anything else to eat? I'm eating out of my mind right now. I haven't eaten since this morning. He looked at her, then he laughed. Well, sure, we'll feed you. You have. 15 minutes later, Nancy was gnawing on a large tea sandwich and answering questions. She had so far refused to eat more serious food just so as not to embarrass the uniformed people, but she was already imagining how she would return the plate of soup that Vanessa was now sorting out. She went over everything one more time, answered a few questions, and the policeman left. After a hearty dinner, she felt sleepy again. I should probably go home. Now that I'm not nauseous, I'm hungry all the time, eating and sleeping. Vanessa laughed. That's normal, kiddo. You eat and sleep with us tonight. You can go home tomorrow. Peter nodded. You know, I'd love to crash on his bed again. Let her sleep wherever she wants. If there's nowhere else, she can move just to sleep without disturbing him. Peter did come to her, lay down in his clothes, put his arms around her, and they fell asleep. How good it felt in his arms. She couldn't even think. How because she just fell asleep. Woke up in the morning, he was gone. She goes into the room. There's a distraught Vanessa sitting at the table. Where did Peter go? He's gone like a tumbleweed again, honestly. He left like that, but he left a note like that. He wrote it. I need to find out about myself, whether he's so attracted to his job, romance, and all that, or he's just a born fool. Nancy sank helplessly into a chair. She decided the night before that everything was going to be different. Peter again. The girl stood up. I'm going to go, Aunt Vanessa. I have to go to work soon. Are you feeling all right? Nancy smiled very well, didn't she? Here, take this with you to work. I baked buns and cutlets. Oh, you don't have to, I do. And remember, if my son is a fool. Do you have it? I got it, and I'm not leaving you. Nancy smiled sadly and walked out of the house. Vanessa escorted her out with a look. God, poor girl, she had been through so much. The time passed very quickly. Nancy had only been called to the police once, and then Vanessa and James had gone to court with her. In general, lately she had the impression that she had new parents, that Vanessa and her James were just a kite over her and fed her, constantly tried to see her off and invite her to visit. Nancy didn't resist. She was very much pleased. She had not heard from Peter, and she had given up waiting. She had enough to do. At the trial she felt sick when William and his mother began to yell at each other in public, and at her too. The girl's eyes went blurry. It was a long time ago. The trial ended without her. She called an ambulance in advance. As soon as the very first contractions began, I knew that as long as they would get there, and also the first labor. They brought her to a room with 2 other women. There was still time, and even though the environment and stomach pains were not conducive to conversation, they got to know each other. One woman came for her third child and the other, like Nancy, for her first. The labor had gone well. An exhausted Nancy threw herself on the couch. The doctor said, "No, look, you're all from the same room. All the girls here still have a princess." Nancy smiled. She fell into a dream. Thought her princess would be the princess herself. The first one to be discharged was the one who was having her third child. "But girls, happily, I've had enough, and I wish you at least one more visit." Nancy laughed. "Oh, let's get away from this rosebud for a while." Vanessa called at the maternity hospital. Every day she had come twice already. She was so excited that Nancy almost cried. "Well, my princess, home tomorrow." The baby wrinkled her nose and Nancy laughed. "Vanessa and James will be coming to pick her up tomorrow." The weather in the morning was as if it had heard that the happy mommy was being discharged from the maternity hospital. It had been pouring rain for 10 days at least. "It's sunny this morning. Look at the weather." She was packing. Nancy came to pick you up. She smiled, turned to her neighbor. "That's it. Bye. Have a nice day." You hugged her, and you too. Your Peter will definitely come to his senses. Yesterday, before they were discharged, lying in the dark, they had a heart-to-heart. Nancy told her roommate's story. It turns out that her man, as soon as he found out about the pregnancy, fled in an unknown direction. "How are you?" "Oh, Nancy, I'm fine. Mom and Dad turned out to be the best. They won't leave me. I used to hurt them so much before." The nurse took the baby away and Nancy gave her neighbor another big hug and kiss. "Be sure to come and visit me. The baby needs fresh air. I have a huge house, so take your parents too." She followed the nurse to the exit. It wouldn't be long before she was finally home. The doors opened and Nancy froze. Standing right in front of her was Peter. He was in a suit. She had never seen him in such parade before, so she hardly recognized the nurse, carried her daughter out, and Peter rushed to her. She asked sternly, "You, Daddy?" He nodded in confusion. "I'm a nurse," she smiled broadly. "But you take your beauty." Peter gingerly took the pouch, peeked inside and looked at Nancy. "She's so tiny." "Nancy, I wanted to kill him." The mood was gone. "What are you doing here?" "What's what?" "I'm picking you and your daughter up from the hospital." "You didn't have to. We did fine on our own. In case you need to leave in a hurry, like you always do." Nancy looked at him angry and Peter looked at her confused. "Nancy, I'm sorry, I'm not going anywhere." "I don't believe you." She took her daughter from his arms and went down the stairs. Peter stood there for a while. Then he rushed after her. He overtook her, stopped. "Nancy, forgive me, you fool. Marry me." Nancy stopped. Did she feel like screaming? Yes, I do. But she restrained herself. "I'll think about it." James and Vanessa hurried from the car to them. Nancy, Vanessa's daughter, hugged her, and Nancy burst into tears. Daughter, how long had it been since she had heard someone call her that? They all got into the car, Peter behind the wheel. When the car started, Nancy noticed how carefully he drove around all the potholes, how he drove as if he were carrying crystal. She smiled a little, and Vanessa leaned over to her ear and whispered right to Nancy, "And even though that knucklehead is my only and favorite son, you need to let him know how wrong he is," and sat down again as straight as anything. Nancy laughed softly. It seemed she had been very lucky to have a mother-in-law this time. One could only dream of such a one. This time the wedding was exactly what Nancy had always dreamed of: a lavish dress, a sea of guests that filled her big house, gifts, wine, and shouts of bitter. She agreed to marry Peter. After 3 months, he gave the whole one eyes and noses left. Every day after work he went to her, bought up in the store all the toys that were there. Nancy only grabbed his head. When he came joyful with a big coloring book, he showed it to Helen and said, "Oh, you'll grow up a little, and you and I will draw here." Peter, this and the books will still be lying around for at least 3 years. He looked at her perplexed. "Well, at least we'll already have it, and we'll buy another one later." She then sighed, "Well, what am I going to do with you?" "You'll buy a house full." "Nonsense. I'll have to look after you." "Nancy, is it?" "Yes." He picked her up in his arms, spun her around, shouted something, then set her down and said you'll be the happiest woman ever. I promise you that.